You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Solidarity! I've been hearing all day, well, they may not get 100,000. How many of you are? You look damn good from up here.
About 2,000 Wisconsin workers rallied at the state capitol in Madison against the anti-union right-to-work bill being rammed through an extraordinary session of the GOP-controlled state legislature. Sheila Cochran, a UAW member and president of the Milwaukee Labor Council, told the crowd that this right-to-work battle is an opportunity to teach and train a new generation of labor activists.
As we try and organize fast food workers and low-wage workers and immigrant workers, now is the time to teach them the glorious history of this movement. Now is that time. And I swear to you, my brothers and sisters, we stand in solidarity with you. Thank you.
Wisconsin Professional Firefighters President Malin Mitchell told the Madison rally that anti-worker forces have plans to destroy the labor movement, but plans have been known to go awry.
They have a plan for unions in the state of Wisconsin. They have a plan for all of us. What did they say to Mike Tyson? They said, "Champ, they have a plan to outbox you." He says, "Okay." "Champ, they have a plan." They say, "You're just a street fighter, Mike Tyson. You can't really fight. You can only knock them out with one punch." They have a plan for you, Mike Tyson. This is when he was still champ now. And the champ looked him square in the eyes in the microphone and said, "You know what? Everybody has a plan." Until I punch him in the freaking face.
Jeff Crocker is a business agent for IBEW Local 159. He came to protest right to work for all workers.
It's not just for the unions, it's for everybody. It's for fair wages and a decent living for everybody, not just us. We're here fighting for everybody.
Kevin Flynn is with Operating Engineers Local 150 in Chicagoland.
I'm here because the cancer of right to work is spreading and it's going to affect Illinois next. Anybody who believes that right to work is good for their state is blind. It drives wages down and it pushes jobs out of state.
A Wisconsin Senate hearing was held Tuesday on the fast-tracked anti-union bill. The bill bans contracts between unions and companies that allow dues to be deducted from paychecks at union shops. Wisconsin Republicans have a plan to get right to work passed in both state houses by next week, until and unless, of course, they get punched in their friggin' faces. Figuratively speaking, of course. This newscast made possible in part through support from the United Auto Workers and from the United Mine Workers of America. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program, mobilization, activation. Time to get involved, time to get active as the attack on workers' rights, as the assault, the full frontal assault. And look, you know, I've had a number of people email me saying, well, you're talking conspiracy, crazy talk. There's no conspiracy in this, folks. The ones at the very top, the Kochs, the Adelsons, the wealth class, the Romneys, right now the leaders of the Republican Party. And, I think it was last year that Mitch McConnell came out and said, look, the Koch brothers basically own us. The wealth class owns the party. And, you don't need McConnell's vague words to understand that. Look at the policies, the priorities of the new legislative session in states across this country. Look at the Republican agenda. Pure and simple, go after those workers and what little rights they have left. Because once they completely control that, again, as they have in the past, look, this is history repeating itself. The aberration, if you will, the abnormality was that at one point in this last 100 years, workers actually had some power and some say. That's not the natural course of things. It's not. And the wealth class of this country want to return to its rightful natural order of them controlling and having all the power and wealth and, average everyday working people begging. Reality is, my friends, what reality is. So we're going to talk about that today. The assault here in Pennsylvania, the big assault, the front lines of the war there in Wisconsin. Lots of that to get to. Also going to talk about the medical marijuana hearing and rally today. Lots of stuff to get to. March 3rd, mark the calendar, the big day here in Pennsylvania, though. Our new governor, and thank goodness for Tom Wolf. Bottom line, thank goodness for Tom Wolf, because without him, we're Wisconsin too. We're in the middle of that same fight. The crazies in the Republican Party would be ramming through the same things you're seeing in Wisconsin, probably not in the same backdoor fashion. They would probably be more front door about it, maybe a little, but we'd be front and center with the exact same thing. But March 3rd, mark the calendar, the governor going to give his budget address. And, I really have been anxious to see what this governor comes out with, because as someone who firmly believes that budgets are not just, a checklist of, a grocery list of things that the governor wants to do. It's a heart check. It's where their heart is. It's their morality. It's their ethic. It's what they truly believe. And you go back and you look at the Corbett budget, cutting education, cutting social programs, cutting programs for the most needy, the most vulnerable, kicking 41,000 adult workers off of adult basic, kicking 89,000 children off of the CHIP program, booting 70,000 of the most vulnerable in this Commonwealth off of the general assistance budget by eliminating it completely. That tells me what that governor believed in. I truly believe this governor is going to be different. And from what I'm hearing, I'm encouraged, because what he's talking about, at least from what the stories that I've seen pop out, one of the first things that have come out is this idea of tax fairness. Now, understand the Republicans had their big little song and dance about tax fairness plan. And all this nonsense, which basically is eliminate property taxes, raise taxes on the poor, let corporations go away, or just not even raise revenue. Let everything collapse. That seems to be the mantra, because you hear the property tax people say, we should just eliminate it. Cause a big crisis, and out of that crisis comes, whatever they can extract from the rest of us. And, less opportunity for your kids. But, the governor now is talking about, a reset. And as he said, this is a chance for a reset on taxes. And he says, I hope the people of Pennsylvania like what he proposes, which is a shifting of education funding away from taxpayers, away from the homeowners through property taxes, and moving some of it back to the state where it once was and where it was supposed to be. Understand, half of education was supposed to be picked up at the state level. That was kind of a leveling thing that, will fund at half the level, and whatever you want above that, you raise in your local areas. But over the years, you've had governors who, like Tom Corbett, who continually cut the state's contribution to the local school districts, made them do one of two things. They either had to raise property taxes on the people who live there, or they had to cut opportunities and programs and do away with what they offered to students. And we've seen each one of those. We've seen a combination of both. We've seen it all across the state. This governor is saying, look, we're going to take the responsibility back. We are most certainly going to be the ones who forward and say, you know what, we're going to fix this and we're going to make it right. And, I give him credit, honestly and truthfully. I think it's about time we have a governor that stands up and says, we're going to be it's us now. And from what I'm reading is he's looking at lowering property tax rates by, shifting some of the gambling money, increasing the personal income tax rates, increasing the sales tax, maybe on some things that are tax exempt. Look, I think we can have a conversation about eliminating some of the things that are exempt. For instance, pretty simple. In my view, any clothing over $100 should be taxed. That's simple. You want those $300 pair of shoes? You're going to pay for them. You're going to pay the tax on it. A good pair of shoes you can get for $80. And I know. Wow, you're judge. No, I'm just saying. Look, we are willing as a society to say, poor working people, working class people, folks who are living on fixed incomes. They've got to be able to buy their clothes and their food and all of these things. And some of it should be tax exempt, but some of it shouldn't be. And we should be having that conversation as well. What tax breaks are we giving to the very wealthy? And maybe we should stop. So I'm willing to have that conversation. I think the governor is too. So as I look at this to me is kind of a step in the right direction, just having this conversation. I've always said we should have a much higher personal income tax. And then, and this is going to be interesting because if I'm reading this right, the governor is going to do something that I proposed probably 8 or 9 years ago, which is you jack that top rate, you jack it way up. You make that top personal income tax rate, 7-8%. I think it's 3.07 now. You make it 6-7% up there. And the less you make, the more we give you back in tax credits. To me, that's a way of getting to that place where we want to be, of having a progressive income tax and not punishing the people at the bottom. And because for me, look, I've always been one who believes the people who the biggest strong guy in the group should carry the most weight. The one with the biggest shoulders carries the most water. We don't want the 80-pound weakling who's sick and bent over, and we don't want them carrying the weight. We want the strong in our society to be able to do that. And to me, this is a way of getting to that. So it's going to be interesting to see in the conversation where this takes us. Now, the Republican response, very much so right in line with what you would expect, which is no. I don't know how else you can get to it. It's going to be no. And I think Seth Grove's comments were spot on. He said that, the governor wants some property taxes and some new spending. He says, quote, "I don't think the General Assembly is interested in that at all," which is just a nice way of saying he proposed it ain't going to happen. Now, understand that from what I'm reading of this budget, it's kind of what the Republicans proposed a couple years ago that they couldn't move. So it's going to be interesting. And this is where I kind of, I think this governor is going to be different because he's a business guy. He's somebody who there really are no entrenched special interests in his view. He wants to get the state moving forward. I think it's going to be interesting. Now, the problem in this is, as someone had pointed out to me, by the state taking on a larger share of education, it's going to make the budget appear much larger. And that's going to take people understanding basic arithmetic and understanding the basic message. And I think it's going to be on him and his administration to explain that, which I think will be very difficult. But I'm looking forward to March 3rd. I hope you are too. It should be very interesting, and I'm excited. I'll take a quick break. Right back after. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1987, marking the death of Edgar Daniel Nixon. Nixon's leadership in the struggle for black labor and civil rights spanned decades. He was born in 1899 in Louds County, Alabama. In 1928, Nixon joined A. Philip Randolph's Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. The sleeping car porters were the first black-led union to get a charter under the American Federation of Labor. Nixon helped to form the branch of the porters in Montgomery, Alabama. He worked as a Pullman porter until 1964. He became a well-known community leader in Montgomery. In 1955, he helped bail Rosa Parks out of jail after she refused to give up her bus seat in defiance of segregation laws. In the days after her arrest, he helped mobilize the black community to boycott the buses. He invited Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to speak and support the effort. The result was the Montgomery bus boycott, one of the most important early actions of the civil rights movement. The 380-day boycott took great personal toll on Nixon. He was arrested and his house was firebombed. But he persevered, helping to bring an end to segregation on public transportation in the city. The boycott gained national attention and helped to launch the civil rights movement. Throughout his life, Nixon served his community as an organizer and activist. President of the local chapter of the NAACP, the Montgomery Welfare League, and the Montgomery League of Voters. During World War II, Nixon wrote to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt calling for the establishment of a USO club for black servicemen. Nixon continued organizing around improving conditions in public housing well into his 80s. Edgar Daniel Nixon was one of many black leaders who served in both the labor movement and the civil rights movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Jess Levin. Fox News' Bill O'Reilly continues to defend his accounts of covering the Falklands War as a reporter for CBS News, in which he repeatedly created the impression he was in a combat zone. In his book, O'Reilly claimed the 1982 Buenos Aires protest he covered was, quote, a major riot where many were killed. He recently repeated those claims on his show.
We couldn't get casualty numbers because, as you know, it was a military dictatorship, and they don't give that to you. But I saw people hit the ground hard. I saw them hauled off, put into ambulances and police vehicles. And the local reportage was that there were fatalities. We have not been able to say how many, all right, but I believe there were. But there is no doubt that this was an extremely violent and volatile situation where reporters were in danger.
But an expert told the Washington Post, quote, as far as I know, there were no people killed at the protest. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
For the standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
All the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
Yes, stand indeed. This brought to us from the good folks in the Republican Party who claim that they love the Constitution. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. I love the Constitution. Carry it in my pocket. Have you ever read it? Evidently not. But hey, from the great people who claim to love the Constitution so much, there seems to be an awful lot that they want to change about it. From our Constitution-loving friends in the Republican Party, it looks like they're just trying to blow things by us. But from everything to who, what, how a charity exists to this latest paycheck deception stuff, amendments that they're just throwing around. According to Politics PA, what they pointed out is that in this session so far, and which is just a little over a month old, Republicans have introduced an amazing 34 constitutional amendments. That's just mind-blowing to me. So here to talk a little bit about this and whatever we get to, our attorney friend and regular contributor here at the program, Erwin Aronson. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here again, Rick. Thank you.
34 constitutional amendments in a month and a couple of weeks.
Well, welcome to the land of divided government.
Okay, I get that, but wow, I thought these are the people who love the Constitution. Lots of changes.
Yeah, well, I guess that it probably is appropriate at this point for me to take a few moments to explain, without a lot of lawyer jargon attached, the process by which we can amend our state constitution. It is a cumbersome process, intentionally so, imposed by the framers, and the language about amending the Constitution has been essentially the same in every iteration of the Pennsylvania Constitution, going back actually to the early 1700s, because Pennsylvania had a state constitution, the Commonwealth Constitution, if you will, that predates the existence of the United States of America as a union. It predates the Articles of Confederation and predates the U.S. Constitution. And essentially, that consistent language that we have in our state constitution says that in order to amend the Constitution, a piece of legislation has to be styled as a constitutional amendment, identifying its subject matter and the specific section of the Constitution which it seeks to modify, if it's modifying an existing section, or creating a new section and number in the appropriate article if it's adding something new. It has to be adopted in exactly the same language by the House and by the Senate in two separate legislative sessions. A legislative session lasts for 2 years, so the current legislative session in which we are presently involved, that you've described in the intro, started on January 1st, actually January 4th of 2015, and it will last through December 31st of 2017. So that's 1 2-year legislative session, and both the House and the Senate would have to pass exactly the same language in the current session or in a current session, and then they would have to pass it exactly the same way again in a subsequent or second legislative session, after which it automatically goes to the people of Pennsylvania, the voters, for a vote. And that what I've described is significant for 2 reasons. The first reason is that it's cumbersome and that the people ultimately get to decide the issue, even though the people don't get to decide when the issue faces them. That's really in the hands of the General Assembly, because the General Assembly determines when they vote on it, both the first time and the second time. So they can time it in the context of a 2-year session to be before the electorate in an odd-numbered year or an even-numbered year, and that's significant, and I'll get back to that. The second reason that it's significant is that it never goes before the governor for a signature or a veto like a typical statutory change would. Any bill, when a bill is aimed at becoming a law, the final step is for the governor to sign it or veto it, as the case may be. And if the governor vetoes it, the legislature can attempt to override that veto by a 2/3 vote of each of the 2 legislative chambers. But a constitutional amendment never goes before the governor. And that's one of the reasons we suspect that this General Assembly has introduced so many constitutional amendments, because they're trying to go around the governor, who's from a different party than the majority party in the State House and the State Senate. So that's sort of a thumbnail sketch, and I know that it sounds a little technical, and it is.
And it should be.
And of how we change the Constitution, and you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I was going to say. It should be. Now, the significance of the General Assembly having the capacity to determine whether this ultimately not only passes but goes before the people for a vote in an odd-numbered or an even-numbered year, depending upon when they ultimately adopt it the second time, is that we all have come to learn, and we've even discussed in the past on the Rick Smith show, that voter turnout, while troublesome in every electoral cycle, is obviously always lower in an odd-numbered year where there's no presidential or gubernatorial race, where there's no statewide political offices, and where there's no legislative race, than in the even-numbered years where those kinds of races do take place and tend to drive turnout a little bit higher. So one of the pieces of the calculus, I suspect, that goes into these things is not only the decision to do this by way of constitutional amendment instead of by statute, but also the timing of it and controlling the timing so that it is more or less likely to be adopted by the voters based upon what voter turnout would be and where voter turnout takes place around the state.
So conceivably, if this passes, and if some of these things pass in this legislative session and the next, we could be looking at 2019 for a vote?
We could be looking at 2019. We could be looking at 2017.
Okay. That was the other question I was going to go to. Can they pass it in that second session and then immediately go to a vote?
Yeah, indeed. One of the constitutional amendments that's being batted around now, something known as Senate Bill 4, that would take away from local governments the capacity to determine what is a public charity for the purpose of determining as well whether the property of a particular entity is subject to the real property taxes in that community, in that school district, in that county. That passed in the last legislative session, and it is now passed again in the state Senate, so it's in the state House. It passed last week on February 17th by a vote of 30-19 along straight party lines, actually. And if the House adopts that, that could go on the ballot this year. It having been in the last legislative session passed by the House and the Senate, and in the current legislative session by the Senate already, and potentially by the House, it could get on the ballot depending upon when the House acts, possibly for the primary or possibly for the general election here in 2015.
So they can run this during a primary?
There's no question but that they could.
Wow. Because, I mean, we know that the primaries even have a lower turnout than the elections.
Yes and no. I mean, intriguingly enough, the primaries in electoral years when Pittsburgh and or Philadelphia are electing a mayor, or in Allegheny County toward Pittsburgh, a county executive, turnout is actually a bit higher typically in the primaries than they are in the general.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So there's a lot of calculus that goes into this. But, when I'm looking at these things, when I'm looking at these things, I'm going, is it the Constitution? Do we throw this stuff in there to take local control away, local rights away, to take workers' rights away? Is that generally something that we want to use the Constitution for?
Well, certainly it is not. I mean, recognize the threshold question that needs to be analyzed, asked, and properly answered. What is the Constitution? Well, the Constitution is a grant from the people of rights to the people's government, not the reverse. And that's a very important distinction. That's not just a few words. Okay? The Pennsylvania Constitution is a very unique document. It starts out in its opening verbiage articulating the rights of mankind, of people. Certainly at the time it was written with a recognition that in that era that we spoke of mankind referring to men, not people. But we have made enough progress in our society that that's not the case any longer. And it really articulates a series of fundamental and basic rights that accrue to every human being that may not be interfered with or modified or molested by any government body. And then it says, beyond those rights, here are a series of other rights, duties, and obligations which we, the people, delegate to you, our government, not the reverse. So when members of the General Assembly start tinkering along these lines, they are tinkering in a fashion that is asking the people to basically kneel to the idea of a majority of 50 senators, 26, and a majority of 203 House members, 102. So 128 people get an idea or something less than that, but 128 of them throw up a vote. And then we're compelled to have the voters look at this and contemplate whether or not they want to give up some additional rights that they presently possess to some government agency. And that really strikes me as curious when I keep hearing about how particularly the Republicans are so against big government. Every constitutional amendment is, by its definition, when it's adding anything to the Constitution, is expanding the size of government. The only time it's restricting the size of government with respect to the Constitution could possibly be when they're taking something out of the Constitution. Because, as I said, the Constitution is a document by which the people grant rights to their government, not by which the government grants rights to people. So, in this instance, for example, when you're talking about this paycheck deception, the proposed constitutional amendment offered up by Senator Scott Wagner of York and embodied in what's been styled as Senate Bill 500 is the government being granted, if it were to be adopted, the right to prohibit the free negotiation of certain terms of a contract. And that really ought to raise the hair on the back of a whole lot of people's necks, because if we can pass a law that impairs any aspect of contracting, we can pass a law or a constitutional amendment that impairs every aspect of contracting. In this instance, they're saying that an employer and a democratically chosen labor organization chosen by that employer's employees through a supervised democratic process would be prohibited from entering into an agreement that says that when the workers affected by a collective bargaining agreement determine that they would prefer to have their union dues, for example, deducted from their paycheck, such a provision would not be permitted. It would be, as a matter of constitution, prohibited. And that's the big government coming in and saying what you are and are not allowed to have in a contract. That sounds like what we learned about in ninth grade civics class, having to do with we shall pass no law impairing contracts.
Yeah.
But here we are, and we're facing it. And on what I described earlier, Senate Bill, what's embodied in Senate Bill 4, a constitutional amendment to arrogate, if you will, to the General Assembly the right to determine what is and what is not defined as a public charity for the purpose of levying local real property taxes that are used, among other things, to finance schools in our community. Again, that is the big government coming in and grabbing some rights that are presently held by the people or through the people to local political subdivisions. And that one is curious as well when we recognize that the General Assembly has authorized and created 500 separate school districts in our 67 counties for reasons that have never been quite well articulated to me. But what the one I've heard is to assure local control. Now we're about to amend the Constitution to take away local control with respect to taxing authority. We've already taken local control away from school districts by conferring upon privateers the right to create charter schools that are funded by the local taxpayers and an unfunded state mandate. And we continue to hear this idea, this silliness about how we're going to retain local control. Well, that's a joke.
So then the question that has to come up with Republican voters now, because I think it's really a crisis of their party, is it your hatred of unions and hatred of education and all of these other things, or your love of small, less intrusive local government and local control? I mean, because you can't have both. You can't have both of these. One has got to win out.
Well, exactly the point. I mean, there's some irony here, or some disingenuousness or lack of integrity, when somebody who claims to be the advocate of small government and advocate of the people is stepping up and suggesting that the big state has to come in and swoop in and steal the right to contract, the right to determine local school budgets away. And understand, this is not the first or the only examples of this kind of conduct. This has been happening, and it's very, very troublesome. And the mainstream media is really missing out on an obligation when it fails to raise these questions in a very direct way of the people who are advocating these radical changes, because this is radical stuff.
I mean, in all of this, I mean, 34 amendments seems obsessive. And you look at some of this, like the paycheck deception stuff, this is radical change. This is stuff that my grandparents' generation, this is stuff that they fought for.
Oh, no, there's no question about it. And there's also no question that we need to look at constitutions differently. Constitutions are the organic law. They are written intentionally to have baselines and to be adaptable to the times. So, for example, going back to where we started this conversation, the Pennsylvania Constitution contains this provision that is referred to by lawyers and jurists as the rights of man provision, the inalienable rights that I discussed a short while ago. We have adopted and adapted a recognition that as we have changed and grown as a society, the rights of man really means the rights of people. It's not mankind, it's humankind. And constitutions are made to do that. Statutes, on the other hand, because they are easier to adopt and easier to repeal and easier to modify, amend, and change, are not anticipated to be organic. They're anticipated to be static to some degree, and if times change, we change the laws to meet the times and the needs of society. So we have articulations in constitutions about those things that are really plainly to be retained by the people: the right to free assembly, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of religion, and free exercise of religion. Those are the big concepts with which government may not interfere. These little concepts, like what can be in a contract between two contracting parties, two parties that reach an agreement, two parties that engage in a negotiating process that has inherent in it certain give and take, and that give and take means that I may give up X cents per hour in pension benefits in return for the right to have the dues check off kinds of things that we've discussed. When I say I don't mean Irwin Union officer or Irwin Union official. I mean that the people affected by this contract, who have a free right to vote to adopt or reject that contract, on both sides, by the way, by the public body and by the membership of the bargaining unit, the group of employees employed by that public body, when they mutually decide that they want to handle a problem a certain way, or handle an issue a certain way, or handle a situation in a certain way, that the state steps in and prohibits, by constitutional change, those parties from freely doing so, that's pretty shocking, because at that point, it makes it impossible for us to do something corollary to that. So what if a community wants to negotiate with its taxpayers that they can pay their tax bill monthly or quarterly instead of annually, because it's easier on them, it's easier to budget? But the state steps in and says, nope, if you don't collect it all on one day, and we're going to pick the day, you can't do it. How is that for fairness? How is that for justice? How is that for justification?
How is that for local control? I mean, at the end of this.
And exactly. How is that for local control?
at the end of this is so much of what I keep thinking of a Ronald Reagan quote. So much of what they believe isn't true, or so much of what they believe is so isn't so. And that's just where it takes me. So last question, what do we do in the process? I mean, this is a long process for a good reason. What do we do?
Well, we remain vigilant. We keep in contact with every member of the General Assembly from our home districts and let people know on one of the two bills that this is not for the Constitution, that we are against it conceptually, but in addition to being against it conceptually, we're against it because of what it says. And by the way, that constitutional amendment is not limited to union dues. That constitutional amendment, as presently drafted, because I've had the lovely pleasure of reading it, speaks to membership in organizations that advocate for the passage or defeat of laws or advocate for the election or defeat of political candidates not being permitted to be deducted from people's paychecks, even if they sign a document saying they want them to be. So this goes beyond unions. This is the Girl Scouts. This is the United Way. This is the coordinated campaign that charities operate through the state's payroll system, where people get to designate to what entity their charitable contributions out of their paychecks may go. It affects all of that as well. So this is not merely or primarily even unions, although that's what spurs it on. That's what spurs on Senator Wagner. And I suspect, having read the memorandum on the constitutional amendment that Senator Wagner circulated, that he doesn't even know the ambit of what he has proposed, because the documentation that he's put forth says things that imply that this applies only to the executive branch and to school districts, but when you read it in its actuality, it applies to the executive branch, it applies to counties, it applies to municipalities, and it applies to school districts as well. Intriguingly enough, there are other public bodies to which it does not apply. So we need to be telling our state House and Senate members that we're against this conceptually, we're against this because it has the impact of not only ruining the relationship between our democratically elected labor organizations and their employers with whom they deal, but it also has the potential of really wreaking havoc among community organizations and entities that help us. The second is Senate Bill 501. That the constitutional amendment is Senate Bill 500. The second is Senate Bill 501 that attempts to do something substantially the same by statute as opposed to by constitutional amendment. And once again, this one offered by Senator Eichelberger has a description that was circulated among other members of the General Assembly of what the bill does that is different from what the bill actually does do. And we do know, however, that it makes illegal the free contracting between an employer and an employee organization to, among other things, have deduction of dues that are authorized by the individual of that employer. So we need to tell people again that we are opposed to these things, and the people we need to tell are members of the General Assembly, members of the House, members of the Senate, and particularly so when they're home, like over the weekend, this coming weekend, and by text and by email and by visiting them in their local offices or visiting them in their home addresses, for that matter, and letting people know that this is not the kind of thing that Pennsylvania should stand for. We're not going to go down this road. This is not a right to work for less state. This is not a place where free riders are going to reign.
There you go. There's got so many other things that need attention. This just seems like an awful waste of time, especially given that it's not going to really do anything to help us move forward. And that's the frustrating part of this. Erwin,
I quite agree.
I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much, as always.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness and fury. No more disarray. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline.
Vetoed. Obama nixes the Keystone XL pipeline.
These are scientists that cannot be challenged.
Exposed. Prominent climate denier scientist funded by fossil fuel industry.
9 criminal counts.
Busted. Duke Energy clipped by the feds. Plus,
So I was flabbergasted.
sorry deniers, climate change is not caused by the sun.
Also celebrated our 6th anniversary. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I don't expect to have to veto it because I expect they're going to have enough sense over on Capitol Hill to do the people's business.
Wrong again, Mr. President. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it is our 6th anniversary of the Green News Report.
I know.
Congratulations to you.
And you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners and affiliate partners. Please stop on by greennews.bradblog.com and help us celebrate, or just stop by bradblog.com/donate to help us stay on the air. We really rely on you, and I'm not kidding. We don't have the Koch brothers, the American Petroleum Institute, the Southern Company, and all of these other fossil fuel companies who have been found to have paid off a phony baloney scientist that wingnuts have been relying on for years, but I don't want to give away your story. So, Desi, what do you have for us today?
Well, we will get to that in a moment. But first, President Obama has vetoed a bill to fast-track the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. He did not veto it on the merits, but because he says it usurps executive branch authority. In vetoing it, he said, quote, "It attempts to circumvent long-standing proven processes for determining national interest."
They do have the ability to override the veto with a 2/3 vote.
That's not very likely.
Well, that was easy.
Moving on, the climate change denial industry's favorite climate denier scientist is funded by fossil fuels.
What?
The New York Times reports that climate researcher Willie Soon, who has gained quite a bit of fame for denying the role of humans in driving climate change, has failed to disclose that he received more than $1 million from the fossil fuel industry and the Koch brothers front groups. In emails, Dr. Soon himself described his studies and his appearances before Congress to deny climate change as, quote, deliverables in exchange for fossil fuel funding.
So he was getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the American Petroleum Institute, from ExxonMobil, from Koch brothers, from Southern Company, these huge energy interests, which he says was no secret, except for the fact that he failed to mention those conflicts of interest when he published his phony so-called scientific papers.
Yes, it's a huge violation of academic ethics, and he is now under investigation by Harvard University and the Smithsonian Institution, where he works, and by the journals that published his work.
Denier Gate.
Dr. Soon used fossil fuel funding to falsely claim that global warming is not caused by humans, but by the sun's variability. That has been repeatedly ruled out by actual climate scientists, like the University of California, Berkeley physicist and former skeptic, Dr. Richard Muller.
Who, by the way, was also funded by the Koch brothers before he discovered,
Hey, dummy, try carbon dioxide. Smack on. So I was flabbergasted. Not only was global warming real and roughly consistent with what the previous groups had said, but the match to carbon dioxide and the fact that solar variability was not responsible. It was to rule out the primary alternative theory.
So that was the Koch-funded scientist, Dr. Richard Muller, debunking the theory that Dr. Soon was peddling, that Senator James Inhofe was pointing to.
Yes.
I'll bet it doesn't even show up for a second on Fox News.
Finally, accountability is also visiting coal giant Duke Energy. The federal government has charged Duke Energy with 9 criminal violations of clean water laws, including for a massive coal ash spill at a Duke Energy coal facility last year that contaminated 70 miles of the Dan River in Virginia. The investigation of that spill led to the discovery that Duke Energy has been illegally dumping contaminated coal wastewater into North Carolina rivers for the last 5 years. Duke Energy has announced it has agreed to pay $100 million in fines and restitution to settle the charges.
And yet no one is going to jail.
Yep.
All of these stories coming to a head today, we have been telling you about for years.
Even if the mainstream corporate media hasn't.
Please consider stopping by to help us celebrate our 6th anniversary of the Green News Report at greennews.bradblog.com, or, as I say, bradblog.com/donate. We really need your help. Thanks, guys. We're going to celebrate all week. Find us and like us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your 6th anniversary Green News Report.
I'm gonna soak up the sun. I got my 45 on, so I can rock on.
Officially in love with Michelle Bachmann, even if she's batshit crazy. Rick Smith.
It's all brand new. I'm crazy for you. No, it's true. Yeah, I'm crazy for you. It's all brand new.
I'll tell you, I miss Michelle. I do. Because you got to miss crazy. I hope she runs for president in 2016. Oh, please. Please, comedy gods, please shine down upon us with the candidacy of Michelle Bachmann. Please, 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 please. She's back in the news. Yeah, she's even though the CIA is saying, Homeland Security is saying, no, there's no credible threat. ISIS is not going to go after the Mall of America. She's on it. She's on it. We should be very, very concerned, she said. This wasn't just a joke or a PR stunt. This was an actual call for those adherents of radical Islam to actually take violent action here in the U.S., particularly the iconic Mall of America. She points out that there's Somalis, lots of them, tons of them in her backyard, and they're coming for the mall. Yeah, she said we have the largest population of Somalis outside of Somalia, right next to the Mall of America in the Minneapolis area. She said, and look, understand, the Department of Homeland Security said, which, I guess come Friday when they run out of money, we won't have to listen to anymore. They said, this is a credible threat. This is just, it's just not. But it doesn't stop her from running out there screaming that, oh, the Mall of America is coming down. They're going to come after us. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, you got to give her credit. She keeps her name out there, and that's part of it. But what's interesting is all of these crazy women who want to be the next Michelle Bachmann. And I look at this Nevada assemblywoman, a woman named Michelle Foray. And I've actually heard a number of things about her over the years. That's kind of funny. But this one takes the cake. She truly believes that cancer is a fungus. So, you've got liver cancer. You just get a little fungus on the liver. A little baking soda, wipe it right out. But the FDA, they won't let you put baking soda on your liver. Can you see the days of snake oil coming back very, very soon? Can you see the guy on the corner, selling the whatever he mixed up in his basement with lima beans and corn and gasoline and antifreeze and whatever else he could pull off the shelf? This will fix everything. If we kill everything, it'll work. But according to her, the FDA will not allow people to try these life-saving things. And evidently she has her own radio program. And she says, look, at the end of it, according to her program, if you have cancer, which she believes is a fungus, and we can put a PICC line in your body and we're flushing, let's say, salt water, sodium carbonate through that line and flushing out the fungus. There are some procedures that the FDA that are not FDA approved in America that are very inexpensive, cost effective. Now, according to the American Cancer Society, the people who actually study, look, if you're looking for cancer advice from me, you've got bigger problems than cancer. I'm not going to tell you what to do. If you've got cancer, go to a doctor quick. And maybe one that approved by the American Cancer Society. But, they've said, look, patients evidently do have some, weakened immune systems. during high doses of chemo, and sometimes they do get fungal infections. But there is absolutely no evidence that antifungal creams or ointments is going to shrink tumors. Just not going to happen. And cancer research in the UK, they've dismissed the sodium bicarbonate, the baking soda claim, as one of those persistent cancer myths that somehow it gets out there. It's kind of like they've mercury in the vaccines, which at one point they did. I just find it very interesting that some of this stuff just holds on, and here she is, someone in an elected position, telling people, what, the government's screwing you. They won't let you put baking soda in your body. Wow. Jeez, just crazy, just nuts. Anyway, she's one of the people pushing this right to try bill. There's a number of these groups out there who are trying to push this libertarian idea that's come out of the Goldwater Institute. A right to try. I should be able to try anything I want, and I don't see any reason why you can't. I just don't think that we should have the medical establishment forced into going, okay, well, you want me to pump gasoline up your rectum with a with a straw? Well, we could try it. It's not going to work. It's just insane to me. Just crazy. Let's talk about something I think would be a very good idea on this very day. Bernie Sanders, who I adore, and Elijah Cummings introduced the Comprehensive Dental Reform Act. Doesn't stand a snowball's chance in hell of passing, but it's worth a conversation. What they want to do is they want to expand dental coverage through Medicaid, Medicare, and the Affordable Care Act, as well as through the Department of Veteran Affairs, because they claim more than 1 in 4 Americans have no dental insurance. And I got to be honest with you, as someone who has dental insurance, it ain't all that great. I think I get like $750 a year if something goes wrong. So when my daughter needed braces, the first payment they wanted pretty much right up front. Anybody who's been to an orthodontist, they it's going to be $2,500. So $750 came from the insurance company. Okay, great. I paid for the insurance. Nice. And then the rest came out of my pocket. If you can find an orthodontist who will take your insurance, that's the other game in all of this. The dental Association's done a masterful job of keeping insurance out of the dental field, thus keeping a large number of people out and making it, kind of a cash business. So which means they can pretty much charge basically whatever they want. So I find it interesting that on this, I guess today is the 8th anniversary of a young man who had an abscessed tooth. And unfortunately, I've never had an abscess. I've been very lucky, never had a cavity, never had, any invasive dental work done other than the wisdom teeth that they ripped out number of years, but no, I guess it's 20 years now, that they ripped out about 20 years ago because they were killing me. I've been very fortunate, but I have friends who, you go get a root canal, you go to get a crown or a couple of them, you're looking at $1,000 a piece. No amount of dental insurance is going to help you really there. So I find it interesting, but what they want to do is they want people to get better oral care. And it's beyond just whiter and straighter teeth, as Bernie Sanders said. It's about, this idea that it could kill you. What they hope it will do is it'll address the more than 47 million people who don't have any dental coverage, and it'll look into areas that don't have enough dentists. It will look at the shortage in dental providers. It will expand the National Health Service Corps scholarship and loan repayment program to get people into the dental field, which I keep telling my kids, go be a dentist. It's a great gig if you get out of Pennsylvania. You get into a state that's heavily regulated like Delaware, you're gold. It also talks about some other things, some funding increase for clinics and oral care programs to help make sure folks get the care they need. I think it's a good, smart thing. It's a good investment. This kid wouldn't have died if they would have just little fix with the abscess, but that would mean government. Can't have government. That would be bad. unless we're taking something away. We want smaller, less intrusive government unless we're using it to steal your rights. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Stick around. We're right back with hour 2.
Something as simple as rock and roll would save us all. Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Solidarity! I've been hearing all day, well, they may not get 100,000, but I don't care how many of you are. You look damn good from up here.
About 2,000 Wisconsin workers rallied at the state capitol in Madison against the anti-union right-to-work bill being rammed through an extraordinary session of the GOP-controlled state legislature. Sheila Cochran, a UAW member and president of the Milwaukee Labor Council, told the crowd that this right-to-work battle is an opportunity to teach and train a new generation of labor activists.
As we try and organize fast food workers and low-wage workers and immigrant workers, now is the time to teach them the glorious history of this movement. Now is that time. And I swear to you, my brothers and sisters, we stand in solidarity with you. Thank you.
Wisconsin Professional Firefighters President Malin Mitchell told the Madison rally that anti-worker forces have plans to destroy the labor movement, but plans have been known to go awry.
They have a plan for unions in the state of Wisconsin. They have a plan for all of us. What did they say to Mike Tyson? They said, champ, they have a plan to outbox you. He says, okay. Champ, they have a plan. They say, you're just a street fighter, Mike Tyson. You can't really fight. You can only knock them out with one punch. They have a plan for you, Mike Tyson. This is when he was still champ now. And the champ looked him square in the eyes in the microphone and said, you know what? Everybody has a plan until I punch him in the freaking face.
Jeff Crocker is a business agent for IBEW Local 159. He came to protest right to work for all workers.
It's not just for the unions, it's for everybody. It's for fair wages and a decent living for everybody, not just us. We're here fighting for everybody.
Kevin Flynn is with Operating Engineers Local 150 in Chicagoland.
I'm here because the cancer of right to work is spreading and it's going to affect Illinois next. Anybody who believes that right to work is good for their state is blind. It drives wages down and it pushes jobs out of state.
A Wisconsin Senate hearing was held Tuesday on the fast-tracked anti-union bill. The bill bans contracts between unions and companies that allow dues to be deducted from paychecks at union shops. Wisconsin Republicans have a plan to get right to work passed in both state houses by next week, until and unless, of course, they get punched in their friggin' faces. Figuratively speaking, of course. This newscast made possible in part through support from the United Auto Workers and from the United Mine Workers of America. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
If I were looking for a good job that lets me build some security for my family, I'd join a union. If I were busting my butt in the service industry and wanted an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, I'd join a union.
I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So, as we've been saying, if not for Governor Wolf, we're right in the same mix that they're not in Wisconsin. And you see what's going on in our General Assembly. And this morning, Mysick had his little write-up saying, the 3 Ps. The Republicans are going after privatizing the wine and spirit shops. They're going after paycheck deception, and they're going after screwing up the pensions. That's the wish list. That's the priorities of the current Republican majority. The question is that your priority? Is it the priority of average everyday working folks who just want to see our economy get a little bit better, their kids to get a decent education? I don't think so. I think we want something a little bit more than just that. But here to talk about the attacks that are going on, not just here, but all across the country, we've got Rick Bloomingdale. He's the president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's always a pleasure to be on the show.
So here we are, the day after they've pushed through this a constitutional amendment to take away people's right to bargain with to agree to something with their employer, and also a statute to do the exact same thing. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I got to give a big shout out to all of our unions for standing together in solidarity, whether they were affected directly or not. They understood that an attack on one is an attack on all, and that the first attack on the public sector is just going to lead to a second attack on the building trades, on the manufacturing, on service sector, all our private sector unions as well. So our folks stood together. They did pass it out of the state government committee. That committee is stacked with conservatives. But then a funny thing happened on the way to the floor. They put it into appropriations committee where they thought it would be a slam dunk, and we mobilized. Folks called. Folks went to offices in the districts. They raised up their voices in solidarity, and lo and behold, the appropriations committee meeting was canceled. Which you may say, well, what does that mean? It means that they didn't have the votes. Look, these guys hate to lose.
Right.
And rather than have a vote on the bill, and this was the constitutional amendment, rather than have a vote on the bill and lose it, because we thought we were pretty confident when we had 3 Republicans and 9 Democrats, so it would have been a 12-12 vote, a tie fails. We were pretty confident that we had 3, so they canceled the meeting. So that pretty much took the constitutional amendment off the table for now. Still hanging out there like the sword of Damocles. They could bring it up anytime. So today, they decide that they're going to run the statute out of state government committee rather than the constitutional amendment. And, of course, that passed out of state government just like the constitutional amendment did, 6-5. We had 1 Republican voting with us, Senator Pileggi, and all the Democrats stood tall. And rather than go to the appropriations committee, they've decided to take it straight to the floor. So they're not in for a while, so we got time to mobilize. And we are going to mobilize. We're going to make calls. We're going to come to the Capitol. We are going to make sure that these folks know that they can't run this bill and win. So we've got a number of Republicans who've already told us they're with us. We're going to keep working. The Democrats have, and much kudos to them for standing solid with us and not flinching at all when they could easily, people have been known to be what they call deal makers. The Democrats have stood tall. We think we have 6 Republicans, but we got to visit them all. They're going to be in their budget recess here starting next week, where they'll be holding hearings around the governor's proposals. And they're in session one day. They may try to run it on Monday. We're going to reassess everything today and tomorrow and see if we need to mobilize for Monday. If not, we've got a month to visit them in their offices and prepare for a fight when they come back into session in early April. So that's in a nutshell, that's what's happening with paycheck deception. We've held it off once again. As you know, last year they finally brought it up for a vote, and that it was defeated 28-20. They, of course, had a good election year. They got 3 more Senate Republicans. Only one of them who's seems to be a fairly decent guy and supporter of workers' rights, Mario Scavella. So the other 2, we're going to have to do some work on. They're in southwestern PA. We got a lot of union density down there. We got to do some education with those folks. They clearly don't understand that paycheck deception, right to work, those kind of things are job destroyers, not job creators.
Yeah, but at the end of this, Rick, just the general concept of what they're proposing seems to be the antithesis of their message of smaller, less intrusive government, of get government out of our lives and off our backs. It just seems to be the antithesis of that by jumping right in the middle of a contractual agreement between an employer and an employee, even if it is the state that's the employer. It just doesn't make any sense on an ideological level, other than this is just pure hatred of labor unions.
Well, that's exactly right, Rick. It is a real dislike and hatred of us and what we do and what we bring to the table in terms of building the middle class. It is absolutely, it's none of their, look, somebody works 40 hours, they earn their paycheck, and they get that paycheck. It's up to that person to decide what they want to do with their money, not Big Brother, not Big Brother government, Scott Wagner. That individual can decide if they want to give it to the United Way, if they want to contribute politically, or if they want to join the union and pay their dues, or if they take advantage of the union, which all of them do, they pay their agency fee. That's their money. They should have the right to decide what to do with their money. And if it takes a person to hit a keystroke, to do health care, to do pensions, to do all the MetLife insurance is an option for state employees. Nobody's complaining that MetLife, a for-profit company that contributes to campaigns, gets the service of the Commonwealth to deduct premiums. Nobody's complaining about that. It is absolutely an attack on labor, an attack on workers.
Yeah.
There's not even there's no doubt in my mind about that. And you can look at the whole agenda as you mentioned.
Right.
It's just one piece of that.
Then looking at the priorities of the Republican leadership, because it is the 3 Ps. It's taking away workers' rights. It's privatizing and stealing public assets to hand off to corporate interests and going after workers' pensions. This seems to be the priority, and none of it, in my view, makes us any better of a state. It doesn't create any jobs. It's not going to take us from 50th in job creation forward. It's not going to educate a child. It's not going to fix our infrastructure, but it is their priority.
And the leadership, I mean, you're right. It's not every, obviously we got a lot of Republicans that stand with us, and we got a lot of Republican union members. But these leaders have decided that an attack on the middle class. Now, if somebody has a good pension, what do they do with that good pension? They don't invest it in fine art or there's, everybody loves a good painting. That's why they have museums and tax dollars to help museums. Those pensioners, those retirees, they spend that money right here in the state of Pennsylvania. That money that they get as a pension that, by the way, they paid in 6.25% of every paycheck. We did pretty good on some investments, with the SERS and PSERS, CERS and PSERS. That money goes right back into the economy. Why they would try to take money out of the economy, going to a fee-heavy 401k where it puts money into the pocket of Wall Street rather than the pockets of the retirees. Again, an attack on the middle class, an attack to put people back into the poorhouses of the old days and enrich some very wealthy individuals. And privatizing the liquor stores, right? Keeping booze out of the hands of our students and our youngsters. Look, nobody's going to lose their job at the state store unless they sell to a minor. You go to a private liquor store in some of the other states, you can walk in there. If you look like you're over 21, they'll sell you a bottle of booze and it says, "Oh, we have to card you." But if they're being driven by profits rather than safety and health, they're going to pick profits over safety and health every time. Yep. And we've seen that time and time again. So we have, we got a great state store system, wine and spirit shops. We got selection, we got good prices, and we got protection of our kids against underage drinking, because those employees are trained and can be fired for selling to a minor. The profit motive does not enter into their decision on who to sell to or who not to sell to. Their jobs are based on selling to folks over 21 and helping, being good customer representatives to their customers who are all over 20. You can't even walk into a state store without a parent if you're under 21.
Right.
Unlike a private liquor store, you can walk in and they've got gum and some other things. And then, by the way, grab a 6-pack or a bottle of, booze. Can't even get into a state store if you're under 21 or if you're visibly drunk.
Yeah, nor should you. Nor should you be able to. It's that simple.
Exactly. Yep. So they provide a great service to the citizens of the Commonwealth. Plus, they put money back in to the Commonwealth for the general fund. That's a good use of our state dollars, a good use of our individual dollars to help make sure that our kids are safe and not drinking underage. So, it is, we've seen this attack one issue after another. All of them do nothing to create jobs. As a matter of fact, taking pension money out of the state doesn't create a single job. It takes jobs away. That retiree, they're going to go into the local store and buy shoes for the grandkids or themselves or their kids. They put that money. Those are job creators, those retirees with those pension dollars. You shift those, big fee, 401k fees to Wall Street. You're putting the money into New York City, not into Pennsylvania. I'd much rather have a strong pension system that puts money into the pockets of the retirees rather than the pockets of the Wall Street robber barons.
There you go. So last question I've got for you. What do we do on these bad priorities? Because look, the Republican leadership is showing what they prioritize, what they believe is most important. How do we show them that this isn't what we want?
Well, you got to do, the best way to do it would have been to show up at the polls.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect example that when you don't show up, you're going to get people who don't represent you. But in the meantime, since we don't have an election until 2016, what we need to do is we got to contact those legislators, and we got to make sure that they understand that people are against privatizing the wine and spirit shops, they're against paycheck protect deception, and that they want people to keep their pensions. And if we got to make some changes, minor changes to the pensions, let's put it on the people who didn't pay their bills. The Commonwealth didn't pay their bills when they should have. The employees paid their bills. They made sacrifices in Act 120 for future employees. Now 23,000 employees have a reduced pension because of Act 120 in order to save the pension. So contact your legislators, make those phone calls, visit them at home, and if you're in Harrisburg, visit them in their district, in their Harrisburg office. But mostly for your listeners, go to their home district offices. That surprises them. When you know what's happening in Harrisburg as a regular taxpayer who may not watch PCN, you walk into that district office and you tell that aide there that you're against these three issues. Now it clicks at home that, oh, this is a voter of mine.
Yep.
This is somebody who vote against me. So they listen a little bit more if you walk into that district office.
Yep.
I can't tell you how big that's been for us, these district office visits.
I'm with you. That's what we've got to do. Rick, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Yep, absolutely, Rick. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Thanks so much. Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Koch brothers and cohorts came around, and they started throwing money at the golden diaper crowds. They came to bust your union bit by bit, they chip away. Molly Maguires who died out there are rolling in their graves, driven by ideologies of xenophobic men, and they will not rest until they become slave owners again.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1987, marking the death of Edgar Daniel Nixon. Nixon's leadership in the struggle for black labor and civil rights spanned decades. He was born in 1899 in Loudoun County, Alabama. In 1928, Nixon joined A. Philip Randolph's Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. The sleeping car porters were the first black-led union to get a charter under the American Federation of Labor. Nixon helped to form the branch of the porters in Montgomery, Alabama. He worked as a Pullman porter until 1964. He became a well-known community leader in Montgomery In 1955, he helped bail Rosa Parks out of jail after she refused to give up her bus seat in defiance of segregation laws. In the days after her arrest, he helped mobilize the black community to boycott the buses. He invited Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to speak and support the effort. The result was the Montgomery bus boycott, one of the most important early actions of the civil rights movement. The 380-day boycott took great personal toll on Nixon. He was arrested and his house was firebombed. But he persevered, helping to bring an end to segregation on public transport in the city. The boycott gained national attention and helped to launch the civil rights movement. Throughout his life, Nixon served his community as an organizer and activist. President of the local chapter of the NAACP, the Montgomery Welfare League, and the Montgomery League of Voters. During World War II, Nixon wrote to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt calling for the establishment of a USO club for black servicemen. Nixon continued organizing around improving conditions in public housing well into his 80s. Edgar Daniel Nixon was one of many black leaders who served in both the labor movement and the civil rights movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing terrorism, learning a little about it, and how long the world has endured it. U.S. For the 19 years from 1914 to 1932, Mr. Luigi Galliani organized and in the early years loosely led a group of Italian anarchists. His followers in the United States, which included the notable Sacco and Vanzetti, carried out a series of bombings and assassination attempts against institutions and people they viewed as enemies. Part of Galliani's historical fame emanates from his teachings of what is called the propaganda of the deed, which means that the violent act on its own can be an effective catalyst to overthrow an existing government or group. That is the theory to which many of the 21st century terrorists subscribe. Join us again next time to see just how vast and deadly Galliani's Italian anarchists were in our homeland. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
And that's the thing. I mean, you look at all of the fights that the Republicans are right now picking, where their priorities lie. The priorities are taking rights away, using big government, even though they say we want smaller, less intrusive. Oh, trust us. Trust us. We want smaller government. We believe in smaller, less intrusive government. Yeah, on the big corporations and the multi-gazillionaires. Yeah, leave them alone. But the rest of us, man, they want in your bedroom. They want in your workplace. They want it all, don't they? Which, the rhetoric, to me, the rhetoric has never meshed. It's always been nice bumper sticker politicking. Yeah, we believe in that. Yeah. But when it comes down to what they vote for and then the priorities they push, nowhere to be seen. And for me, this idea of joining a union and having that power, that voice, that contract, that piece of paper that says this is what's expected of me. This is what's expected of you. That's really what being a union member is. That's what being in all of this is. outside of the whole community and understanding that, together we're stronger and all of that stuff. It's really that piece of paper that says, this is what I expect from you. This is what you expect from me. And if we have disagreements, we'll work them out. That's pretty simple. What the right wing wants, what the Republican leadership in this state and the Koch brother controlled Republican Party want across the country is they don't want that we'll work things out. They want we will impose upon you what we think, what we want, and you'll like it. And if you don't, we'll just can you. You're out the door, and we'll can you for whatever reason. Look, Pennsylvania is an at-will state unless you have a labor contract that lays out why and how you can be fired. And I look at this story that a friend sent me of this woman, because my wife is kind of the breastfeeding maternity Nazi. She's a big advocate of mothers' rights, if you will, because she's a mother. This former Bloomberg TV correspondent, this woman, Megan Hammerlin, evidently she just filed a lawsuit claiming that because she was pregnant, she got fired. She told them she was pregnant. Then they started assigning her to other stories and giving the things that she used to cover away to other people without children and without being pregnant. And, this whole process of, kind of shifting things around. And as I'm reading through this story, outside of the Pregnancy Act, which says you can't be fired for being pregnant, and that goes back into the 70s. Legally, I don't know. And I'm going to be interested to follow this case because, as long as they don't say we're firing you because you're pregnant, I don't know, because the employer has all the rights. So she can file for unemployment and she can, find a lawyer because she made enough money to go sue. But at the end of the day, unless they told her flat out, the reason is we're telling you right to your face, good luck. I mean, this is one of those court battles that's going to take a lot of money to get through, where the average everyday working mother can't afford. If you're working at a job that's paying $10, $11 an hour and they fire you because you were pregnant, you're not going to have the $20,000 retainer to go get a lawyer. It's not going to happen. You're out of luck. Which is another reason why I truly, firmly believe that you need to have that contract, which is why I'm a big proponent of people joining labor unions. The article pointed out that, part of the reason that, Ms. Hammerlin is filing this suit is because of the Family Medical Leave Act, which requires her employer, which I guess is Bloomberg Television, to give her 12 weeks of unpaid leave and guarantee their job when they return. And as I read the article, they wrote it just that way, and to guarantee their job when they return. And their part is a little weird because it's not the exact job. You're not guaranteed to go back to exactly what you're doing. You're guaranteed to go back to a job. And that's been hammered out over the years. And it may come, hey, well, that's the job we've got left. And that took a pay cut. That's something else I got to wonder about. I mean, here's the thing. We don't have a strong law that says that we believe in family values. We don't have a strong enough, look, this is how bad it gets. And, put pregnant women aside, put mothers aside, because it's nonsense that we're a nation of family values. Screw that. We already know better. We've learned. We know better. Look what we've done to our servicemen and women who are coming back from the wars and all of the ventures we've had around the world. All of these National Guards people who had jobs who their employers didn't hold their jobs for them. So if we're not going to hold jobs because it's the patriotic, flag-waving, God-fearing thing to do, what makes us think we give a rat's behind about a pregnant woman as a nation, honestly and truthfully? Now, for me, this is why I keep saying we need to have stronger laws, but more importantly, we need to have stronger labor unions. We'll make accommodations for workers who have a broken ankle. You have light duty, you let them sit on a stool, whatever. You'll figure it out. But heaven forbid a woman asks for accommodations while being pregnant. Nope, doesn't happen. You do your full duty or you go, you're done. Now, fortunately, the Supreme Court heard that case of the UPS woman who, she wanted to work. She just asked for a reasonable accommodation. So maybe there's some changing going on. But I look at this story, and this is one of those things that women, especially, you should be really, really behind. Just my thought. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk what's going on in Wisconsin, day 2 of the rallies and the going on as the Republicans there. Again, the priorities, my friends, are attempting to steal the right to organize and the right to join a union away from workers there. Quick break, right back.
Even if I'm looking like really crazy, I won't wait till she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. Grace to find me when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back down, you're gonna help me back up again. If I fall back down, you're gonna be my friend.
Let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline.
Vetoed. Obama nixes the Keystone XL pipeline.
These are scientists that cannot be challenged.
Exposed. Prominent climate denier scientist funded by fossil fuel industry.
9 criminal counts.
Busted. Duke Energy clipped by the feds. Plus,
So I was flabbergasted.
sorry deniers, climate change is not caused by the sun.
Also celebrated our 6th anniversary. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I don't expect to have to veto it because I expect they're going to have enough sense over on Capitol Hill to do the people's business.
Wrong again, Mr. President. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it is our 6th anniversary of the Green News Report.
I know.
Congratulations to you.
And you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners and affiliate partners. Please stop on by greennews.bradblog.com and help us celebrate, or just stop by bradblog.com/donate to help us stay on the air. We really rely on you, and I'm not kidding. We don't have the Koch brothers, the American Petroleum Institute, the Southern Company, and all of these other fossil fuel companies who have been found to have paid off a phony baloney scientist that wingnuts have been relying on for years, but I don't want to give away your story. So, Desi, what do you have for us today?
Well, we will get to that in a moment. But first, President Obama has vetoed a bill to fast-track the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. He did not veto it on the merits, but because he says it usurps executive branch authority. In vetoing it, he said, quote, it attempts to circumvent long-standing proven processes for determining national interest.
They do have the ability to override the veto with a 2/3 vote.
That's not very likely.
Well, that was easy.
Moving on, the climate change denial industry's favorite climate denier scientist is funded by fossil fuels.
What?
The New York Times reports that climate researcher Willie Soon, who has gained quite a bit of fame for denying the role of humans in driving climate change, has failed to disclose that he received more than $1 million from the fossil fuel industry and the Koch brothers front groups. In emails, Dr. Soon himself described his studies and his appearances before Congress to deny climate change as, quote, deliverables in exchange for fossil fuel funding.
So he was getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the American Petroleum Institute, from ExxonMobil, from Koch brothers, from Southern Company, these huge energy interests, which he says was no secret, except for the fact that he failed to mention those conflicts of interest when he published his phony so-called scientific papers.
Yes, it's a huge violation of academic ethics, and he is now under investigation by Harvard University and the Smithsonian Institution, where he works, and by the journals that published his work.
Denier Gate.
Dr. Soon used fossil fuel funding to falsely claim that global warming is not caused by humans, but by the sun's variability. That has been repeatedly ruled out by actual climate scientists, like the University of California, Berkeley physicist and former skeptic, Dr. Richard Muller.
Who, by the way, was also funded by the Koch brothers before he discovered,
Hey, dummy, try carbon dioxide. smack on. So I was flabbergasted. Not only was global warming real and roughly consistent with what the previous groups had said, but the match to carbon dioxide and the fact that solar variability was not responsible enabled us to rule out the primary alternative theory.
So that was the Koch-funded scientist, Dr. Richard Muller, debunking the theory that Dr. Soon was peddling, that Senator James Inhofe was pointing to.
Yes.
I'll bet it doesn't even show up for a second on Fox News.
Finally, accountability is also visiting coal giant Duke Energy. The federal government has charged Duke Energy with 9 criminal violations of clean water laws, including for a massive coal ash spill at a Duke Energy coal facility last year that contaminated 70 miles of the Dan River in Virginia. The investigation of that spill led to the discovery that Duke Energy has been illegally dumping contaminated coal wastewater into North Carolina rivers for the last 5 years. Duke Energy has announced it has agreed to pay $100 million in fines and restitution to settle the charges.
And yet no one is going to jail.
Yep.
All of these stories coming to a head today, we have been telling you about for years.
Even if the mainstream corporate media hasn't.
Please consider stopping by to help us celebrate our 6th anniversary of the Green News Report at greennews.bradblog.com, or, as I say, bradblog.com/donate. We really need your help. Thanks, guys. We're going to celebrate all week. Find us and like us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your 6th anniversary Green News Report.
I'm gonna soak up the sun. I got my 45 on, so I can rock on.
What do you believe would be the repercussions for Democrats if they end up losing in the recall election?
I think honestly, there aren't going to be any repercussions.
We ain't voting no more prima donnas. You want to call the National Guard? Let's get it poppin'. What happens in Wisconsin don't stay in Wisconsin. Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I got to be honest, I remember being in Wisconsin, 4 years ago now, saying, this is a national issue, only to have Debbie Wasserman Schultz say, no, if we lose the recall election, no problem. And I guess it's that kind of lack of strategic thinking that has been the demise of the Democratic Party. Just my thoughts. But as we speak, there are a couple thousand people in the Capitol there in Madison, Wisconsin, fighting to hold up, to push back against this no rights at work agenda. And here to talk a little bit about what's going on, we've asked Brendan Fisher. He's general counsel for the Center for Media and Democracy. Brendan, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
So here we are again. It was, 4 years ago, I was sleeping on the Capitol floor there, the very cold marble Capitol floor. Fighting to help public sector workers, saying at the time, look, if they can attack the public sector workers, it's only a matter of time before they get the right to work. Here we are.
Yeah. For a lot of people, this is not a huge surprise. But if you listen to Scott Walker's rhetoric over the past 4 years, this is kind of the opposite of what he said he was going to do. After the firestorm of 2011 and the recall election, Walker insisted that right to work is not a priority. He said it would be a distraction. He even said that private sector unions are his partner in economic development. And just a few months ago in October, he said right to work is not coming to my desk. Basically nothing to worry about here. Of course, behind closed doors, there was that video of him talking to Diane Hendricks, yep, who's a billionaire in Wisconsin and a major Republican donor, and he was saying that the goal with Act 10 is divide and conquer. First you go after the public sector unions, and then you go after the private sector unions, and that's exactly what happened. So despite 4 years of Walker saying right to work is not going to happen, here we are, February 2015, and it is happening. The ALEC legislators in the Wisconsin legislature called an extraordinary session, and they're in the process of fast tracking the bill through the legislature.
So just so
There
people
was,
get this, because I want to stop you right there. Just so people get this, this is being the priority that it is. They went above and beyond their normal work. This is something. This is something out of the normal. This is something out of the norm. This is something above and beyond that they've chosen to go this other route just to get this little piece of their wish list, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's an extraordinary session. So it's not even a special session because a special session requires some involvement. I think the governor has to call a special session, and this is an extraordinary session where the legislature would typically not be meeting, but they've called an extraordinary session apparently because it's such a priority that right to work get passed immediately. So yes, the legislature is going out of its way to pass this law and crush unions in the state.
And, just to highlight, we're not talking geniuses there in Wisconsin either. This, as I understand, and I guess you guys broke this, this is almost verbatim, word for word, the American Legislative Exchange Council's model legislation.
Yeah. So when the bill was released on Friday night, I pulled it up and pulled up the ALEC Model Right to Work Act, and it's basically identical. We have the side by side on our website, prwatch.org, and all of the operative language is basically word for word. And that's not a big surprise. You saw something similar in Michigan. The Michigan Right to Work Act was also a word for word copy of the ALEC model legislation. And it's also not a big surprise considering that the Wisconsin legislature is dominated with ALEC members. Both the head of the Senate and the Assembly are ALEC leaders. They're the former ALEC state chairs for Wisconsin. And Walker himself was an ALEC member in the legislature. He actually introduced an ALEC model right to work bill back when he was a state legislator in the early 2000s. And it was interesting, on Twitter this last weekend, ALEC tweeted out a photo of Walker with the current CEO of ALEC, Lisa B. Nelson, and apparently they were rubbing shoulders last weekend at the governor's conference in D.C. And ALEC was boasting about their alumni Scott Walker doing all these great things.
Now, gee, how cozy, how nice and cozy.
Yeah.
The people's work being done. How nice. And and it's no, I mean, look, it sounds funny, and it is. It's you can laugh at it if it weren't so destructive, if it weren't so dangerous, and it weren't so harmful to average everyday workaday folks like you and me. If it weren't so bad, it would be funny.
Yeah. I laugh, I guess, because I'm cynical, and to a certain extent, I think you're just being from Wisconsin, grown numb to all of this insanity. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is not something that the people of Wisconsin were calling for. The fact that Walker had to run against right to work or run from right to work in order to get elected governor, I think, is an indication that this is not something that was a priority for the people of the state. It's something that's a priority for the Koch brothers and for ALEC and for out of state corporate interest and for big donors like Diane Hendricks. And I mean, the studies seem to be pretty clear that these right to work laws are associated with lower wages. So it's going to mean lower wages and fewer benefits for working people in Wisconsin, and it's going to mean that unions have fewer resources to counterbalance corporate interests in elections. Something else that I think is really interesting about this Wisconsin bill is that they've exempted the police and firefighters union. So police and firefighters union again. So even though every other union in the state is affected by this right to work law, but the police and firefighters unions are not. So if you decide not to join the union and you're a police officer or a firefighter, you still have to pay the cost of representation, which is fair. But the argument that these laws are about worker freedom, that these laws they're not about corporate interests. These laws are about protecting the interests of workers and giving workers the freedom to choose whether they want to pay for the cost of representation. If that's actually what they believe, then why would Republicans exempt the unions that support them?
Yeah, that's
this is the burden of having to pay fair share fees is just impermissible and an affront to liberty and freedom. Then why would you not want your biggest supporters to experience that same sort of freedom?
That's an excellent question. Is there anywhere else in the country where that little quirk is in the law? Because I got to be honest, I didn't hear that, and I don't know anywhere where that's the case. Do you know of anywhere?
No, not that I'm aware of. Perhaps for the if you're going explicitly after public sector unions, but for when you've got attacks on public sector unions and private sector unions, I'm not aware of anywhere else that's been the case.
Wow. And the thing is as Walker was saying, and then I got a number of people emailing me saying, Walker won 3 elections there, so this must be what the people of Wisconsin wanted. And from what you said, he from the beginning it wasn't on the agenda, but I go back to look at Michigan. It's the same MO. Oh, we're not we're not interested, yet bang, there it was. It just seemed very eerie to me that it was the exact same playbook.
Yeah, it's extremely similar to what happened in Michigan, where the governor gives the impression that this is not something that he supports. It's not something that he's calling for, and then lo and behold, it's on his desk and he's signing it. And it's also very similar to what happened in 2011 with Act 10. Walker in the 2010 election never campaigned on collective bargaining. He never said that he was going to crush public sector unions. There's even video of him talking with an Oshkosh newspaper's editorial board and saying, "Oh yeah, of course I'm going to bargain with public sector employees." He was not elected on a platform of busting unions, but that's exactly what he did. It was his priority legislation. It was in his back pocket the entire time. And that's something I think very similar to what we've seen again with right to work. It's governing by sneak attack. That's really what it is, and I think that's really scary when Walker is considering a run for president, because he's going to say one thing, but when he's actually in office, it's almost impossible to know what he's going to do next or what his policy priorities are going to be.
You must have been reading my mind, because that's exactly where I'm going. I mean, he's the leading guy in Iowa right now of the Republican primary voters. He's the standard bearer because he's gone after those workers and he put them in their place. Which again, I got to question the priorities and the mental status of the Republican primary voter.
Yeah. I mean, he really has turned some heads with what everyone's calling a barnstormer of a speech in Iowa a few months ago, and and this is the case on a lot of issues. On abortion, for example, he's always been very anti-abortion. He's the son of a Baptist minister, very very religious, and but during the 2014 elections, when he was running against Mary Burke, who was a woman, pretty liberal. He released this ad where he's looking right at the camera, and basically adopting the rhetoric of the pro-choice movement and talking about a woman's right to choose and talking about how the decision to have an abortion is between a woman and her doctor. That was not reflected in his policies, but he adopted he gave voters the impression that he was sensitive to issues of women's choice. And then when now that he's reelected and now that he gets before Iowa voters, he starts boasting about shutting down Planned Parenthood and restricting abortion in Wisconsin. Again, I mean, this is a guy who really, I just don't think you can trust him. He is very, he's a master equivocator, is probably the best that I can say.
So let me ask you this, in looking at what's going on right now in Wisconsin, any chance of this stopping? Any chance of putting the brakes on this, or is Wisconsin the, 24th right to work state now?
Yeah, I think it'll be 25th. The half of the country, at least in terms of states. It doesn't seem like there's anything that's going to stop it. It's likely to pass the Senate this week, probably the Assembly next week, and the Republicans have pretty commanding majorities. There's going to be probably a few Republican defectors, but the legislative leaders seem to think that they've got the votes for this. And as I think we saw back in 2011, the Republicans have gotten pretty good at
whipping the votes,
wrangling their caucus, and there's already ads up in case there were any potential defectors. Americans for Prosperity is going up with ads today, urging legislators to vote for right to work and convincing Wisconsinites that right to work is just going to be a boon for the economy.
Yeah, like it's been everywhere else. Come on, like it's been everywhere else. It's been wonderful in Indiana, hasn't it? There's just been a flood of jobs. Oklahoma, same thing. All those manufacturers, millions of them. Just so many jobs, they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same with every one of these ALEC policies that have been implemented in Wisconsin over the past few years. Everything was all of these bills: Act 10, tort reform, corporate tax cuts, tax cuts to the rich. All of these were pushed through the legislature with the promise that it's going to create jobs in Wisconsin. It's going to turn Wisconsin's economy around. But it just hasn't happened. After 5 years of Walker and after 5 years of these austerity policies and anti-union policies and corporate-friendly policies, Wisconsin is number 32 in the country for job growth, and we lag all of our neighbors in the Midwest. We lag the national recovery. We lag behind. None of these policy prescriptions that Walker and the ALEC legislators in Wisconsin have pushed and that they promised would create jobs have turned out like they've said. I think it's worked out well for the 0.01 percenters and for the corporate interests that bankroll their campaigns, but it certainly is not working well for the people of Wisconsin.
Well, at least now you'll be able to steal jobs from Michigan. That'll be a good thing, right? Because wait a minute, no, hold on. Michigan was supposed to steal them from you. Well, maybe you can steal them from Iowa. Well, no, maybe not. Because the question I have is, what happens? We become right to work nation. Where are you stealing jobs from? Because that's one of the big pitches. If we just lower our wages, make the conditions worse, we can steal jobs from people. We can compete with China. Insane, insane stuff, Brendan.
Yeah, well, Minnesota is the state directly to our west. It's probably the state that's most similar to Wisconsin demographically and culturally, but they're just killing us. They're killing Wisconsin economically, and it seems like in large part it's because of the progressive policies that Mark Dayton has enacted. Rather than cutting taxes for the rich, he's raised taxes for the rich, and they've preserved union rights, and Minnesota is outpacing Wisconsin significantly when it comes to job growth, and basically by on every metric, Minnesota is doing much better than Wisconsin with its progressive policies.
Well, maybe we need him to run for president. Something, I don't know. I look at this, and this is not just a race to the bottom. This is terminal velocity, free fall, straight through the bottom. Just is what it is. Brendan, I appreciate you taking time for us. Giving us the latest of what's going on. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks for having me.
Brendan Fisher, General Counsel for the Center for Media and Democracy. Their website, prwatch.org. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The bar's still open, but man, it's slow. The tip jar's light and the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some are maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far $5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
From Lisbon, Portugal, this is your World in 2 for Wednesday, February 25th, 2015. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. There's been a lot of talk lately about the strategic risks caused by U.S. military officials releasing details on an upcoming coalition attack on Mosul, the Iraqi city controlled by the Islamic State. But that decision does not appear to be weakening the commitment of some other coalition countries. Australia and Canada are implementing tough anti-terror laws, while France has begun to confiscate the passports of those suspected of traveling to Syria. Denmark and the UK are preparing to do the same. And earlier this week, the government of New Zealand announced it would send more than 100 defense forces to Iraq to help train the Iraqi army. But what might seem like a politically safe decision has caused quite a lot of debate. Prime Minister John Key delivered a blistering speech yesterday in Parliament calling out members of the opposition Labour Party for breaking rank with their ideological peers around the world and attempting to block the deployment on political grounds.
Labour in New Zealand, when it comes to sending New Zealand forces for training, says no. They say no. But the interesting thing is the Labour opposition in the UK, they say yes. The Labour opposition in Australia, they say yes.
Detractors of the deployment suggest the government is ill-prepared to respond to several worst-case scenarios, like a potential kidnapping of a Kiwi soldier. But Key was adamant that decision merely came down.
When people are out there being beheaded, I'm sorry, but this is the time to stand up and be counted. Get some guts and join the right side.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. But, you look at this. Scott Walker leading the the polling of the Iowa caucus goers put out by the Quinnipiac University poll. 25% of the caucus goers on the first draw, Walker's their guy. Followed by Rand Paul. He's got 13%. Mike Huckabee. And, of course, Ben Carson, each with 11. And you go, wow. Wow. There's not one guy on that list that I would go would be even semi-reasonable in the White House that I think you can trust. I don't think there's one guy on there that you can trust. It just blows my mind. And you got to look at this as, where are we moving as a nation? We are definitely moving toward the corporatocracy, a fascist state, if you will. And, a friend sent me a love letter from the Chamber of Commerce's Global Intellectual Property Center blog, which I love that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has a Global Intellectual Property Center because we got to be out there in the cold. But they write this open love letter. And this is what the title of their blog is: Open Love Letter to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They say, "Dear TPP, I can't stop thinking about how great we'd be together. Dreaming of all those exports passing through our borders keeps me up late at night. Oh, the possibilities are endless, and it's hard to keep me from dreaming about our future. Compromising 40% of the world's economy. I'd be a fool not to cross the Pacific for you. I'd go to the 12 countries and span all 3 continents just to dance with you. But as we all know, love is a matter of quality, not quantity. Our love is meaningful and can satisfy our biological needs, especially if you guarantee to protect regulatory data for 12 years, 12 whole years. Dear TPP, I would drop to one knee and say, I do, for gold, no diamond standard, for intellectual property. My creative and innovative talents need your protection. Without trade agreements like you, it would be a long, hard journey to jumpstart our economies. But don't worry. I love your trade promotion authority. And if she were my own family, I'm ready to adopt her today And if that would fast track me to your heart, I can't wait to call you my own and make sweet, sweet economic progress with you. Please be mine. I will be yours. Love, the American business community. I actually, there's very few times where I don't have words other than, oh my God, these people are crazy. I mean, really, when the Chamber of Commerce writes this kind of drivel, be afraid. Be very afraid. Wow. Nuts. But I guess that's the whole corporatist wing of the Republican Party. Just, oh my goodness. How much crazier can we get? Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Me and my people are just about through. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Solidarity! I've been hearing all day, well, they may not get 100,000, but I don't care how many of you are. You look damn good from up here.
About 2,000 Wisconsin workers rallied at the state capitol in Madison against the anti-union right-to-work bill being rammed through an extraordinary session of the GOP-controlled state legislature. Sheila Cochran, a UAW member and president of the Milwaukee Labor Council, told the crowd that this right-to-work battle is an opportunity to teach and train a new generation of labor activists.
As we try and organize fast food workers and low-wage workers and immigrant workers, now is the time to teach them the glorious history of this movement. Now is that time. And I swear to you, my brothers and sisters, we stand in solidarity with you. Thank you.
Wisconsin Professional Firefighters President Malin Mitchell told the Madison rally that anti-worker forces have plans to destroy the labor movement, but plans have been known to go awry.
They have a plan for unions in the state of Wisconsin. They have a plan for all of us. What did they say to Mike Tyson? They said, champ, they have a plan to outbox you. He says, okay. Champ, they have a plan. They say, you're just a street fighter, Mike Tyson. You can't really fight. You can only knock him out with one punch. They have a plan for you, Mike Tyson. This is when he was still champ now. And the champ looked him square in the eyes in the microphone and said, you know what? Everybody has a plan until I punch him in the freaking face.
Jeff Crocker is a business agent for IBEW Local 159. He came to protest right to work for all workers.
It's not just for the unions, it's for everybody. It's for fair wages and a decent living for everybody, not just us. We're here fighting for everybody.
Kevin Flynn is with Operating Engineers Local 150 in Chicagoland.
I'm here because the cancer of right to work is spreading and it's going to affect Illinois next. Anybody who believes that right to work is good for their state is blind. It drives wages down and it pushes jobs out of state.
A Wisconsin Senate hearing was held Tuesday on the fast-tracked anti-union bill. The bill bans contracts between unions and companies that allow dues to be deducted from paychecks at union shops. Wisconsin Republicans have a plan to get right to work passed in both state houses by next week, until and unless, of course, they get punched in their friggin' faces. Figuratively speaking, of course. This newscast made possible in part through support from the United Auto Workers and from the United Mine Workers of America. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
I got to tell you, in talking earlier about, the Republicans' constitutional amendment to deny workers the ability to make an agreement with their employer, which just kind of blows my mind. And it shows their priority. there's so many other things we've got to work on. And today, Dalen Leach, one of the state senators who I'm a big fan of, I think Dalen's a good guy, had a hearing on his Senate Bill 3, which, again, I'm kind of shocked that it isn't already the law. But it just kind of, for me, it shows that two very different ways of thinking. The Republicans are attempting to restrict with their legislation, whereas, Dalen and Mike Fulmer, who you figure it out, they're attempting to make things open a little bit, which is why I've asked Les Stark. He's I lost the. Les Stark is the executive director of the Keystone Cannabis Coalition. Les, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So today, the big hearing on the Senate Bill 3, which I understand is the medical cannabis bill. Curious your thoughts on it.
It was a good hearing. It's important, as you know, the Senate Bill 1182, which was the medical cannabis bill in the last legislative session, passed the Senate with a 43-7 vote, which we think is outstanding. That's 86% of the legislators that voted for it, which represents, accurately represents 85% of the support for the in the general population for medical cannabis. But when it passed the Senate, it was stripped down and amended and watered down, and it wasn't really a good, solid bill. Now, when they reintroduced the bill as Senate Bill 3, they introduced it as the version that passed the Senate last September, and what the hearings were to establish is, should more conditions be added, should an expanded methods of delivery be added, such as vaporization and so forth. So it was a pretty interesting hearing in that regard, and the consequences, have some degree of importance, because we want to make this the best bill that we possibly can that will benefit the most amount of Pennsylvanians as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the medical part of this, I've yet to find anyone, and I can't believe that this hasn't already passed. I can't find anyone who finds any opposition to having it available for people who have a medical condition. We've legalized the use of cocaine and opiates for medical use. Why haven't we done marijuana? That just it's a struggle.
It's a good question, and it's nothing new. I'm a historian. I wrote a book called Hempstone Heritage, which is a book about the history of the hemp industry in Pennsylvania. And I studied mainly how it was used as a fiber plant and seed plant for clothing and rope and all the other products you can make out of it. But as part of my research I couldn't help but notice that we also have a long history of medical cannabis in Pennsylvania, in addition to the industrial hemp. And this medical cannabis was grown all around the state, down in Glen Olin, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. We have pictures of, in the early 1900s, a company called H.K. Malden had a farm where they grew large acres of massive, towering cannabis plants full of big flowering blooms of what we would call marijuana today. And they made cannabis extract medicines. There was a company in Warren, Pennsylvania, that made something called Piso's Cure, which they prescribed for generations. And there was over in York County, in Pelham Township, there was a man named C. Robert Kopp, who made something called Kopp syrup, which was a cannabis extract. And you can see they started to advertise cannabis sativa and cannabis indica both in the newspapers around the state as early as the 1850s. And they were sold in every pharmacy throughout the state. So our great-grandparents, they knew the benefits of cannabis, and they had for hundreds of years. The Pennsylvania Dutch people, which is part of my heritage, they used it as traditional folk healing. The old Pennsylvania Dutch powwow doctors use it in healing rituals. So cannabis has a long history in Pennsylvania. It's not something that all of a sudden people just made up and said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we legalize marijuana and we'll call it medicinal? That's not the case. And in fact, it stretches back thousands of years to ancient China and ancient India. They used it medicinally for all this time.
So how did it become illegal? I guess is the other question to that. If we have this history and it's something that corporations were built around and it was part of the fabric of our society, how did it become illegal?
Well, it was the federal government made it illegal on August 2nd, 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act. But before they made it illegal, there was about 30 states or more that already had passed legislation. In Pennsylvania, we made marijuana illegal on May 22nd, 1933. There was an earlier law that had been passed in 1917 that banned opium and heroin and cocaine. And in 1933, it was just amended to include the word marijuana. There doesn't even seem to be a big debate about it. And after it was passed, a lot of people still didn't even get the word out. When marijuana was banned in Pennsylvania, the first person that we know of in Lancaster County, anyway, where I'm from, to be arrested under the new state marijuana laws was an 81-year-old hemp farmer who admitted that he was growing it, but he said he had no idea whatsoever that it was illegal because as far as he was concerned, he was growing hemp and he's growing it for seeds for his chickens to eat. So this was, but on a national level, there was a big scare. Now, at that time, marijuana, most people didn't even know what marijuana was. It was an obscure Mexican slang term. The farmers knew it as a fiber crop. They knew it as hemp. When they prescribed it as medicine, they knew it as cannabis. So when they said that they're going to ban marijuana, this evil weed that Mexican immigrants were bringing up here and spreading in our culture is what they were saying, most people didn't even make the connection that that's actually was what we had always historically called cannabis and hemp. So a big part of it had to deal with the demonization of a word, a demonization of racial groups, and stereotypes, and was a lot of hysteria.
Interesting.
So
I mean, that I had never heard. I mean, and it makes sense, I guess, on a certain level, because we've always been afraid of the other, and the best way to get someone to repel from something is say it's the other's fault.
Right.
Interesting.
And that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in this history, because I wanted to show, I come from the Pennsylvania Dutch tradition. My ancestors came here from Germany in the 1740s. And, this is a culture that I know. And I know that one way to reach them is to point out to them that, hey, look, it was the Pennsylvania Dutch people. We're the ones who brought it here. It wasn't the Mexicans that brought it over and all of a sudden everybody started smoking it. No, this has been a part of our culture for centuries.
Interesting. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Les Stark. He's executive director of the Keystone Cannabis Coalition. He's just one of a number of groups who are working to pass this Senate Bill 3, which I think is long past due. Why? I guess have you come across anyone against passing the medical cannabis bill? Anyone in your travels?
Very few. I can say that, most polls show that 85% of the public supports it. So that's reflected in most conversations that I have. I find that 85% of everybody I ever talk to is definitely for it. And then out of the 15% remaining, I would say half of those don't really have an opinion and they don't feel educated on it to guess either way, or just flat out don't care. And there's only a real small percentage of the hardcore vocal, opponents. And unfortunately, they have a disproportionate amount of power because they have the laws in their favor. They have an army of enforcers and the lawmakers, they've always listened to their most vocal, hardcore, conservative constituents. And we're trying to balance that now. We want them to hear from the people that have never participated in the process, who sat silently on the sidelines. That's what we're trying to do, is get as many people involved, because sometimes when we talk to our legislators, they might say, I'm not really opposed to it, but this is something that I don't really hear too much from my constituents. They tell us that if there's something that has to do with Endangered Species Act or something like that, they'll get flooded with emails and phone calls and letters and all sorts of things. But the medical marijuana issue is an issue that, despite the rallies that have been going on for the last couple of years, despite a nonstop stream of positive press coverage and everything that we've done, some of them still say they're not really hearing from their constituents. So I wish everybody that is in range of this broadcast that hears these words says, you know what, I'm going to join in. I'm going to make my voice heard, and I'm going to contact my state representative, my state senator, and tell them that they need to support medical marijuana and make this a top priority and get this passed finally, because we've been working on it for so long.
Yeah, you know, I got to be honest. I was in the camp of up until a year or two ago. I was in the camp of it's not my issue. I really don't care one way or another. I think it should be medical marijuana. Absolutely should have been done. It's not something I would have been active until I met someone who I saw. Look, there's this guy who he's got a problem. He's got an eye problem. And it gives him relief. And you're forcing this person to really be a criminal to be able to get some relief. And it makes no sense to me on any level. And that's where I see this should just be passed already and we should move on. But for those folks who, and I guess there are two parts to this. There are folks who fear legalization of marijuana and having it on the store shelves. I mean, I'm not sure where I feel on the legalization part for general consumption. I don't know that I want it next to the Tic Tacs with corporate America figuring out how to make it worse. But this isn't that issue, and I just want to make that clear.
Right, but you make a good point. I mean, one of the big items on the Republican agenda right now is the privatization of the liquor stores. They're arguing for increased and wider availability of hard liquor and beer in the stores, and they're going to be right next to the Tic Tacs. So how they can, to me, it seems a little bit hypocritical of how they can push for greater access to alcohol, which is far more harmful, and yet be so adamantly opposed to even medical marijuana. It doesn't make sense. But now we do know that in the state Senate, there's 26 co-sponsors. There's only 50 state senators. So we already have the votes in the state Senate to pass. Where we really have to put the focus on and the energy of our activism has to go to the House. They're the ones that has to be convinced. They're more conservative. There's more of them. We need at least 102 state representatives to say yes. And we also, once it gets assigned to the Health Committee in the House, we have to make sure that they move on it. They don't just sit it there, because a lot of times bills go to committees to die.
Right.
We want to make sure that doesn't happen. So, but the medical marijuana issue and the recreational marijuana issue, those are entirely separate issues, and we can discuss full legalization at a later day, and say several years from now when we see how these other states have gone. But right now, it's an emergency situation for these people with legitimate medical need. And I was like you, I had to be convinced, because when I first heard about it, even a few years ago, I have to admit that even I was a little bit skeptical, because I thought, is this just some kind of angle that they're getting at? I wanted to know if it was true. Well, because of my involvement in this issue, I've gotten to meet Dana Ulrich and Lolly Bench-Myers and all the women that we call the mama bears. And I've met so many people that send me their stories and tell me how cannabis has helped them in their lives. And over these last couple of years, it's been an education process for me where I see that it is real. It's a real legitimate issue, and the time is now, and we have to finally make change now.
All right, there with you. The website, KeystoneCannabisCoalition.org. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Les Stark's name. It'll take you right there. Les, I appreciate you taking time for us. Appreciate your passion in the fight, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Don't let us get old. Don't let us get stupid, all right. Just make us be brave. Make us play nice. Let us be together tonight.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1987, marking the death of Edgar Daniel Nixon. Nixon's leadership in the struggle for black labor and civil rights spanned decades. He was born in 1899 in Louds County, Alabama. In 1928, Nixon joined A. Philip Randolph's Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. The sleeping car porters were the first black-led union to get a charter under the American Federation of Labor. Nixon helped to form the branch of the porters in Montgomery, Alabama. He worked as a Pullman porter until 1964. He became a well-known community leader in Montgomery. In 1955, he helped bail Rosa Parks out of jail after she refused to give up her bus seat in defiance of segregation laws. In the days after her arrest, he helped mobilize the black community to boycott the buses. He invited Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to speak and support the effort. The result was the Montgomery bus boycott, one of the most important early actions of the civil rights movement. The 380-day boycott took great personal toll on Nixon. He was arrested and his house was firebombed. But he persevered, helping to bring an end to segregation on public transportation in the city. The boycott gained national attention and helped to launch the civil rights movement. Throughout his life, Nixon served his community as an organizer and activist. President of the local chapter of the NAACP, the Montgomery Welfare League, and the Montgomery League of Voters. During World War II, Nixon wrote to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt calling for the establishment of a USO club for black servicemen. Nixon continued organizing around improving conditions in public housing well into his 80s. Edgar Daniel Nixon was one of many black leaders who served in both the labor movement and the civil rights movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing terrorism, learning a little about it, and how long the world has endured it, even within the U.S. For the 19 years from 1914 to 1932, Mr. Luigi Galliani organized and in the early years loosely led a group of Italian anarchists. His followers in the United States, which included the notable Sacco and Vanzetti, carried out a series of bombings and assassination attempts against institutions and people they viewed as enemies. Part of Galliani's historical fame emanates from his teachings of what is called the propaganda of the deed, which means that the violent act on its own can be an effective catalyst to overthrow an existing government or group. That is the theory to which many of the 21st century terrorists subscribe. Join us again next time to see just how vast and deadly Galliani's Italian anarchists were in our homeland. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Grandfather worked in the kitchen, making bread and flour and wheat. Right off the boat from Finland to live in the land of the free. He was working the oven, sweating in summer's heat. On the floor from 1 to midnight, 7 days a week.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So Jamaica. Oh, Jamaica. Jamaica has decriminalized the use of marijuana on the island. And I got to be honest, I actually thought they had. I didn't realize it was illegal there in Jamaica, but they have now, because originally they were fearful, according to the reports, of what the U.S. would do to them if they had the audacity and the gall to decriminalize. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But today here in Pennsylvania, the big hearing in the Senate on Senate Bill 3, we sent our Capitol reporter, Sean Kitchen, to follow what the proceeding. Sean, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick.
So the big hearing, what went on?
Well, earlier today at 9 o'clock in the morning, there was a Senate hearing in the North Office building. And usually you go to a hearing, there's 30, 40, 50, 60 empty seats. Well, there was 50, 60, 70 people standing inside the aisle because they packed the hearing. It was so big with the activists there. They went over they went over delivery methods, how you can track medical marijuana through patients and how it's distributed to those patients, and how you limit their dosage amounts. And then they had the Medical Association there today who spoke out in opposition to this bill.
So the medical association's against using medicine to help people with?
Yes, they're against this bill, even though they're for opioids and Ritalin and all those other types of medicines with other chemical drug compounds in it. They came out against having medical marijuana today for people because they believe it's a gateway drug. So they're still using this 1930s reefer madness.
Oh, and OxyContin isn't a gateway drug.
And yeah, after that happened, Dalen Leach and Mike Fulmer basically backhanded those two people metaphorically across the face and told them, step back on that, step down because of the OxyContin deaths and how that's leading towards more heroin addictions. While this is not a gateway drug at all, and this actually helps people, and there's never been an overdose of someone taking marijuana.
Yeah, but to me, it's curious that this isn't already been done because, as we've just said, the reality is you've got Oxy, you've got all of this heroin and all of these opiates and all of this stuff that have been legal for medicinal purposes for as long as I can remember, and yet this, not so much. And I got to wonder how much of it is the pharmaceutical companies going, we can't control this.
Yeah, and that's what, last year I think Lee Fang wrote a good article about this in The Nation magazine, where the pharmaceutical industry is trying to kill a medical marijuana movement because it's going to put drug companies out of businesses. I mean, if you have this miracle drug in marijuana, putting out companies are making millions and millions of dollars or billions of dollars off of painkiller addictions and people taking painkillers, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So how in the hearing did they talk about how they were going to track? Because look, at the end of the day, I'm one of these hypocritical animals called a parent. I don't know that I'm thrilled with my 12, 13-year-old daughter or any of my kids getting a hold of this stuff. Maybe when they're older, they can make their own choices when they're of age. But right now, I don't know that I want it on every street corner. Any way to track where this stuff goes, and what's the enforcement mechanism? Anything on that?
Yeah, that's actually the first part of the hearing. It was about for 45 minutes. They had a couple executives from a Colorado-based business. I forget which one it was, but what they specialize is they had made a database. If you get medical marijuana in Pennsylvania, you are issued a card, and then that doctor would put, okay, you need X amount of this strain for this cancer or this strain for PTSD. And then once you hit that limit in a day or that prescription limit, you cannot go anywhere else around the state and get medical marijuana. So it prevents straw purchases, someone getting like ounces of marijuana and distributing it to people. They can track it down to the gram. So your exact dosage, they can track it down to. And then it would not cost the state any money at all to implement this type of system. There would be a transactional cost on your purchase of marijuana on the not the consumer end, but on the wholesaler end. So it's an absolutely free service for the state to take that up, and they would install it, and then.
And where would they install it? I mean, would this be something done by the wine and spirit shops if we can hold on to them, if they're not privatized here at the end of the year? Is this something that they would do?
I don't think so. I think this would be done through the Department of Health.
Okay.
And this is something that they would track, but it's a free computer program that this company will install for the state, and then it pays for itself.
Okay, that I get, but where would you actually pick it up at? I mean, where's you going through the pharmacies? Somebody on the street corner opening their coat? What?
Well, they want to use. They don't want to put it in the state store system. They actually want to have this in private and nonprofit interest. So. That's where the bill's heading with that part. I think that we have an extremely good distribution service already in place, state source system, and having something to mirror that would actually, I think, work better, be in the interest of the people instead of having a for-profit venture for that.
Yeah, we're having everyone start one up on their street corner. Any bit in this legislation, like I've said, I've got a friend who's got an eye problem, and it reduces the eye pain and the stress and the headaches and all of that stuff. Any chance that he'd be able to grow it himself, or does he have to go through this system?
I think he's going to go through the system. I don't think they're going to have that, allowing that yet to allow people to grow marijuana in their houses. I think that's going to be that would have to be a separate bill for outright legalization. But what experts are already calling this process that we're going through is actually going to be one of the most comprehensive medical marijuana bills in the country if they can do this right.
Right.
And that's where Fulmer and Leach want to do. They want to have the best bill in the country for this, and they would have the most expansive bill or the most comprehensive and all possible delivery methods.
Well, I would hope they don't want the worst. I mean, I would hope they want to get it right. Just so that because I believe in good government and I believe in doing things right. I would hope that they would want to do it right. No.
Well, yes, they do. But last year, that stuff was stripped out of the House because people of your basic stereotypes of reefer madness that you're going to be using just to smoke pot and sit around all day and do nothing. So that's where the fight's going to be. As Lester said, it's going to be inside the House. Today at the rally this afternoon, Ed Gainey from Pittsburgh was there speaking, and he said it's time to put these lies to rest. This is about helping people. It's about good government. This is about taking care of the people who elected us. And if it means they need to get medical marijuana, it means they need to get medical marijuana, and they need to do it correctly.
So the other part of this then is, there's this frame out there. There are all these drug addicts. Anything on drug testing? Anything on what employers may do in this, given some of our insane laws?
That was not brought up at the hearing. The last thing that was brought up was the delivery method. In the old bill, the Republicans stripped out the inhaling methods through vaporizers or through smoking it, and you can only go in pill form. So that would actually put people who have cancer, it would make that useless. If you're on cancer medicine, you're going to take something that's going to take a couple hours to digest instead of smoking it or vaporizing it and going right and getting the healing effects right away.
Yeah, I don't see the problem with vaporizing it. Image wise in my head, I've got this weird thing of a 5 or 6 year old kid sitting on the street corner smoking a doobie. I think I have an image problem with that. But a nebulizer, I completely understand.
Yeah, or that would also go through oral ingestion through like a pill form or like there's something the size of a raisin. Today, there was someone there, 29-year-old Iraq war veteran, who's in his 30s now, who has MS. I think he developed PTSD through being his year of service and just going through stuff that happened in wartime. And then he was diagnosed with MS. And he can run his business as a screen printer, printing shirts and all, because this bill, it would be illegal for him to smoke it. So he's closing down his business as of May to move as a medical marijuana refugee to California or Colorado, so he can actually live in peace and actually have 0.2 of a gram of marijuana oil a day to cure his MS symptoms.
Well, the good thing is I'm hoping now is the time to get this pushed through. Did you get the sense that this is the legislature and the people there thought that this was going to make its way through? Because I think Governor Wolf will sign it, right?
Yeah. Well, I actually was in contact with Wolf's office today, and his spokesperson, Jeff Sheridan, said Wolf is in support of all methods that are prescribed from the doctor.
Okay.
And so, he left it at that. But they also had a cart. They had a couple posters there today of all the senators that supported it last time around. And this is actually an extremely supportive bill inside the House. The only thing is, it depends on what committee it goes to and what Terzai does. If this goes in the state government committee and you have Darrell Metcalf sitting on this bill, it might die in committee.
Right.
It dies in committee. So this is actually on Terzai, because it looks like, from the look of it, there were a lot of people in the House supporting this, close to a majority. There were only 11 representatives outright against it, and the majority of them look like they're for it.
So here again, it comes down to Terzai.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. I don't like the odds. Sean, I appreciate the update. Thanks for being there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Have a good day, Rick.
All right, Sean Kitchen, our Capitol reporter. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Their future plans. They saw the food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought, help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the poor keep getting poorer, people turn away, not able to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew. They can't have the legs on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
But let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline.
Vetoed. Obama nixes the Keystone XL pipeline.
These are scientists that cannot be challenged.
Exposed. Prominent climate denier scientist funded by fossil fuel industry.
9 criminal counts.
Busted. Duke Energy clipped by the feds. Plus,
So I was flabbergasted.
sorry deniers, climate change is not caused by the sun.
Also celebrated our 6th anniversary. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I don't expect to have to veto it because I expect they're going to have enough sense over on Capitol Hill to do the people's business.
Wrong again, Mr. President. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it is our 6th anniversary of the Green News Report.
I know.
Congratulations to you.
And you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners and affiliate partners. Please stop on by greennews.bradblog.com and help us celebrate, or just stop by bradblog.com/donate to help us stay on the air. We really rely on you, and I'm not kidding. We don't have the Koch brothers, the American Petroleum Institute, the Southern Company, and all of these other fossil fuel companies who have been found to have paid off a phony baloney scientist that wingnuts have been relying on for years, but I don't want to give away your story. So, Desi, what do you have for us today?
Well, we will get to that in a moment. But first, President Obama has vetoed a bill to fast-track the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. He did not veto it on the merits, but because he says it usurps executive branch authority. In vetoing it, he said, quote, "It attempts to circumvent long-standing proven processes for determining national interest."
They do have the ability to override the veto with the 2/3 vote.
That's not very likely.
Well, that was easy.
Moving on, the climate change denial industry's favorite climate denier scientist is funded by fossil fuels.
What?
The New York Times reports that climate researcher Willie Soon, who has gained quite a bit of fame for denying the role of humans in driving climate change, has failed to disclose that he received more than $1 million from the fossil fuel industry and the Koch brothers front groups. In emails, Dr. Soon himself described his studies and his appearances before Congress to deny climate change as, quote, deliverables in exchange for fossil fuel funding.
So he was getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the American Petroleum Institute, from ExxonMobil, from Koch brothers, from Southern Company, these huge energy interests, which he says was no secret, except for the fact that he failed to mention those conflicts of interest when he published his phony so-called scientific papers.
Yes, it's a huge violation of academic ethics, and he is now under investigation by Harvard University and where he works and by the journals that published his work.
Denier Gate.
Dr. Soon used fossil fuel funding to falsely claim that global warming is not caused by humans, but by the sun's variability. That has been repeatedly ruled out by actual climate scientists, like the University of California, Berkeley physicist and former skeptic, Dr. Richard Muller.
Who, by the way, was also funded by the Koch brothers before he discovered...
Hey, dummy, try carbon dioxide. Smack on. So I was flabbergasted. Not only was global warming real and roughly consistent with what the previous groups had said, but the match to carbon dioxide and the fact that solar variability was not responsible. It enabled us to rule out the primary alternative theory.
So that was the Koch-funded scientist, Dr. Richard Muller, debunking the theory that Dr. Soon was peddling, that Senator James Inhofe was pointing to.
Yes.
I'll bet it doesn't even show up for a second on Fox News.
Finally, accountability is also visiting coal giant Duke Energy. The federal government has charged Duke Energy with 9 criminal violations of clean water laws, including for a massive coal ash spill at a Duke Energy coal facility last year that contaminated 70 miles of the Dan River in Virginia. The investigation of that spill led to the discovery that Duke Energy has been illegally dumping contaminated coal wastewater into North Carolina rivers for the last 5 years. Duke Energy has announced it has agreed to pay $100 million in fines and restitution obligation to settle the charges.
And yet no one is going to jail.
Yep.
All of these stories coming to a head today, we have been telling you about for years.
Even if the mainstream corporate media hasn't.
Please consider stopping by to help us celebrate our 6th anniversary of the Green News Report at greennews.bradblog.com, or, as I say, bradblog.com/donate. We really need your help. Thanks, guys. We're going to celebrate all week. Find us and like us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your 6th anniversary Green News Report.
I'm gonna soak up the sun.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
A new public polling policy people report. You gotta love it. The public policy polling people. New national poll on the Republican primary voters. 57% of them say that we should be establishing Christianity as the national religion. Never mind that whole constitutional thing. Never mind that whole First Amendment thing. Don't worry about it. Christianity should be the religion of the nation, they say. They point out that in the polling, they point out only 30% of Republican voters believe that Congress should not make a law respecting the government telling you what the religion is, which just I just lose my mind when I see things like this. The same poll found 74% of Republican primary voters favored former George W. Bush. So there you go. I guess that tells you 2/3 of them do not believe in global warming, and nearly half don't believe in evolution. Great. Wow. And these are the people that want to run the country right into the ground. Let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, what do you think? National religion?
Isn't there something kind of in the Constitution saying that we can't establish national religion or recognize one?
Yeah, you see, you seem to think that they care about the Constitution. They don't. It's nice for a nice bumper sticker, but to actually read it, no, that's too much. I mean, how many of my Second Amendment friends have never read the whole sentence, let alone the whole document?
Yeah, I think that whole part about a well-regulated, militia kind of misses the point for a lot of people, I guess. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, I guess the answer is clear, which is buy guns and establish a national religion.
There you go. You better be in the majority. You better have the gun and join the right religion. And that's my problem with establishing a national religion. Which one is it? Because I've often said, if we just say we're a Christian nation and you said Christianity's the national religion, I can't wait to see each of the Christian sects then going after and eating each other. That would be fun.
That would be. But I'm feeling if we do establish it as Christianity, we're going to get the American version of Christianity, which is one in which Jesus was pro-war and hated poor people and was totally okay with George W. Bush. So there we go.
There you go. What's going on? I understand the Senate passed the cloture vote. It looks like the Homeland Security bill, a clean bill, is out of the Senate. Is that true?
That is true. Well, we passed the cloture vote, and I actually don't have the final numbers for the final one. But yeah, it has advanced in the Senate. It looks like it's on its way out. This broke the cloture vote by about 98-2, which of course was holding it up. And this happened after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell essentially decided to split the legislation in order to try to avoid a shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. Initially, of course, the legislation was, aimed to fund the department while also stripping funds for the administration's executive action on immigration reform. Democrats filibustered that pretty heavily and pushed back against that. And, that was ultimately met with about 4 filibusters. So he tried to ease tensions down this time, putting in a, split bill and having a separate vote set to occur that would essentially be focused primarily on defunding the Department of Homeland Security in terms of the executive action on immigration. This politically is being put forward by McConnell as a way for the Senate Republicans to embarrass centrist Democrats. They've noted that a number of them have been critical of the idea of passing immigration reform via executive action. And in his mind, this is now a way to sort of get them on the spot with that issue in particular.
Nice. But I think all he's really done is backdoored Boehner.
Yeah, exactly. And, this is kicking the House back, kicking the ball back to the House. And that's sort of a dangerous opportunity right now. We know that the Department of Homeland Security is set to shut down on Friday. And the last person you want to have with that responsibility on their backs is the House of Representatives under John Boehner. What we've seen so far is the usual suspects in the House, those in the sort of more conservative caucuses, reaching out to John Boehner and Republican leaders, telling them not to move forward on this, to take a stand on the executive action that was signed by about 20 Republican lawmakers so far. And it could set up a dangerous situation where Boehner will not be able to bring the legislation to the floor. Or if he does, we could see it, ultimately, be sabotaged by Republicans. So it's a very, precarious game. Boehner right now is probably in a position where he may have to violate the Hastert rule if he wants to get anything done, which would mean that he would actually have to, get Democrats to sign on and pursue bipartisanship for a change.
Wow.
So right now it's a scary situation.
He has certainly backed himself into a corner, or I should say McConnell has seriously backed him into a corner. Especially when you got Peter King running around saying, I'm going to vote against, I'm going to vote for funding it and against the leadership. It looks like some splintering going on. That, to me, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and really, this is the new Republican Party as it stands. Since 2010, there has not been, the unity that typically defined the Big Tent Party, and it's certainly to their detriment. This is a situation where even if the Republicans are in power, they still can't move forward with legislation that's backed by Republicans, and that's that would be pretty comical and pretty fun for progressives if it didn't have such dangerous circumstances.
Yeah, and I still remember that the Republicans beat up on Democrats for they don't want the Department of Homeland Security, and here now the Republicans are the ones who are working to defund it and put it out of business. Nice. Let's move on. The Supreme Court, I guess a hearing today over a woman who wore a scarf on her head at a job interview.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. So this was a woman who wore a black hijab to a job interview with the company Abercrombie. And she was ultimately, denied a job, allegedly for religious discrimination. Now, the kind of case that has come out of this is a question over whether or not employers should be expected to deduce from your, from what you're wearing, a person's religion. Abercrombie is saying that they had no way of knowing that.
Get out of here. Get out of here. You see somebody wearing the black head scarf, come on, and I will make the assumption, and I rarely do this. You looked at her, you go, no, we don't want her just because of that. And whatever excuse they could come up with, they tried to find, and they didn't hire her specifically because of it.
And I don't want to scare you here, but that's actually the same thing that Alito said today. He, pointed out that it would be ridiculous for employers to pretend if they saw a nun that she was not Catholic. It would be ridiculous for them to pretend like they didn't know that a Sikh wearing a turban was a Sikh, or a Jew wearing a yarmulke or whatnot. And it looks like this is something where the majority of the justices are, going to be ruling against Abercrombie.
I'm actually literally speechless. Wow, move on. That's the only thing I can think of. Crazy weekend coming up, huh? CPAC, right? Crazy Pack?
Yep. We're going to be down there tomorrow, and it's going to be pretty big. This is, of course, an election year, so we're going to be seeing all of the big stars, like your buddy Rick Santorum, who's going to be speaking. Christie is coming down here. We're going to be seeing, Jeb, and a special speech from Sarah Palin as well, and everybody's favorite, Donald Trump, who's going to be doing his usual sort of heavy on the show stick here. But we're going to be out there for the remainder of the weekend and of the weekend, and I'm sure we're going to have quite a few fun stories to share with you.
I cannot wait for the updates from Crazy Pack. I can't believe, though, that they're going to let Sarah Palin come. I mean, I thought her star is kind of fizzled. At least I think so. I mean, she's just now kind of a sideshow. I would have thought they would have moved her along by now.
That would have been sort of the clear money. Right now, she's sort of being viewed by quite a few Republicans as no longer the big ticket draw that she once was, and more of a liability for the party. But my feelings are that she was probably booked for this before she gave her disaster speech in Iowa a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, good. I can't wait for crazy reports. Looking forward to it, Justin. Appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Look, I can't wait. Cannot wait for reports from Crazy Pack. Right back after this.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From Lisbon, Portugal, this is your World in 2 for Wednesday, February 25th, 2015. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. There's been a lot of talk lately about the strategic risks caused by U.S. military officials releasing details on an upcoming coalition attack on Mosul, the Iraqi city controlled by the Islamic State. But that decision does not appear to be weakening the commitment of some other coalition countries. Australia and Canada are implementing tough anti-terror laws, while France has begun to confiscate the passports of those suspected of traveling to Syria. Denmark and the UK are preparing to do the same. And earlier this week, the government of New Zealand announced it would send more than 100 defense forces to Iraq to help train the Iraqi army. But what might seem like a politically safe decision has caused quite a lot of debate. Prime Minister John Key delivered a blistering speech yesterday in Parliament calling out members of the opposition Labour Party for breaking rank with their ideological peers around the world and attempting to block the deployment on political grounds.
Labour in New Zealand, when it comes to sending New Zealand forces for training, says no. They say no. But the interesting thing is the Labour opposition in the UK, they say yes. The Labour opposition in Australia, they say yes.
Detractors of the deployment suggest the government is ill-prepared to respond to several worst-case scenarios, like a potential kidnapping of a Kiwi soldier. But Key was adamant that decision merely came down to having guts.
When people are out there being beheaded, I'm sorry, but this is the time to stand up and be counted. Get some guts and join the right side.
This is odd. America's laws to deter corporate crime actually force victims to help subsidize the criminals. Follow the bouncing ball here. First, a court orders a corporation to pay punitive damages to a victim of its criminal acts. Second, the corporate offender pays up, then merely subtracts a big chunk of that payment from its income tax, effectively taking money out of our public treasury. Third, while the criminal is counting its tax break, the victim is notified that the punitive damage money he or she received from the corporation will be taxed as regular income. Fourth, that means a big chunk of the victim's payment actually goes to replenish the public money the corporate villain subtracted. Bad enough that corporate finance lawmakers legalize such encouragement of criminality, but corporate coddling judges are playing the same disgraceful game by drastically reducing the amounts that juries order corporations to pay. In a Montana case, for example, a jury awarded $240 million in punitive damages to the families of 3 people, including 2 teenagers, killed in a car crash. The deaths were blamed on a steering defect that South Korean automaker Hyundai was found to have known about and recklessly ignored for more than a decade. But a district judge has since supplanted the jury's ruling with her own, while declaring that Hyundai's, quote, reprehensibility certainly warrants a sizable punishment. She cut the corporation's punitive payment down to $73 million. Hello, that's not punishment to a $79 billion a year car giant. It's pocket change. Why would Hyundai executives quit putting corporate profits over people's lives if that's their, quote, punishment? This is Jim Hightower saying, with subsidies and wrist slaps, the corporate criminal whirligig will continue to spin, making a mockery of justice.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
All because the gays are getting married, that is why people die and children go unfed. When I'm sad and alone and I'm wondering just why everything about my life is feeling like it's going down a toilet bowl. It's good to know it's cause the gays.
Oh yes, it's all everything's their fault. Did you know that? Everything's their fault. Think about this for a second. I mean, I go back to that poll that 57% of caucus of primary voting Republicans are going, "Hey, we want a national religion, yeah!" Yet we believe in the Constitution. I mean, it's almost as radical and as insane as here in Pennsylvania. You've got the Republican-led General Assembly putting forth 34 constitutional amendments because they love it so much that they want to continually change it. And it's not even the good stuff. I mean, to me, a constitutional amendment worth pursuing would be getting money out of politics, ending corporate personhood. To me, that's where the fight is. You want to take this country back, that's the fight right there. That ends a whole bunch of problems. But we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to go after workers' rights. We're going to continue to go after the people. And I think, as Erwin Aronson, our attorney friend, pointed out earlier, the Constitution, and this is something I don't think we hear enough of. The Constitution doesn't grant us rights because, as a matter of thought, we have all of the rights. The Constitution is a document to our government of the rights that we're willing to give up, of the things that we allow them to do. And you stop and you think about some of the craziness that has come out of people pushing for different constitutional amendments, and this idea of we need a national religion. Think about that for a second. Just let that just sink in for 1 second. Just 1 second. Let it just meld into the mind. Which religion would it be? I mean, would you be happy with it? I mean, honestly and truthfully, would you be thrilled with it? And the answer is no. And it is kind of a First Amendment violation because we have the freedom of religion. It doesn't say the freedom to have a Christian religion, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition our government for redress. I mean, that's us. Simple. But yet you've still got the simple-minded going, we could just be a Christian nation, then we could do away with the Muslim folk. And as I always said, once we decide, and I'm sure at some point in my lifetime, the crazies will win out on this, and we will declare ourselves with the flag in the ground that we're Christians. That's when the real fun should begin. That's when the well-armed crazy Christians will then take it out on the rest of the people, and then we'll have a Christian war, which will be interesting. But what I find very ironic is at a time when you've got Republicans who want us to stake the Christian flag in the ground, and we want more Christianity, and we're literally waging a war against the poor. We're literally waging, and this is true. We are waging war against the homeless. You don't have a house, you don't have somewhere to put your head. We're going to send our militarized police force out to beat the living tar out of you. And the latest incident came in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where somebody, saw this poor guy. You look at him, this guy's homeless, or just he has really bad hygiene. And you see the person who took the video saw this guy kind of, stumbling along looking for a place to sit or whatever. And this cop, this Victor Ramirez, he grabs the guy, takes him by the arm, throws him to the ground, slaps him, tells him, I'm not screwing, with the dreaded big bomb. I'm not screwing around with you. And then he arrests the guy. and takes him to jail. Had it not been, and this is again, good on this person who took the video. Had it not been for this person taking the video, this guy goes to jail. This guy gets beat up. This guy gets harassed and intimidated, and all of these other things that come along because we've made these laws that make. And look, was the cop a big giant? One of those? Absolutely. We could do with less of those. But it's the laws that crazy right-wingers passed that put these cops, who are giant, big, you-know-whats, in these positions that give them the authority to abuse the homeless. Because, it's the law. We can't have them sitting on benches, and we can't have them around. It's insane. So let me tell you, you want to become a Christian nation? Maybe you should read the damn book. I know you want to beat us with it, but maybe you should understand it first. Just a thought. And then not pass idiotic laws that have our militarized police force beat the living you-know-what out of some poor old guy. The video's over at my Facebook page. And this guy's hurting nobody. This poor guy's just trying to make it through the next minute, let alone the next day. And I'll tell you, that's what's insane about our system. It's what is insane about this whole, I want to be a Christian nation. My behind. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. Get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program anywhere. In fact, listen to it live anywhere right from the app. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. Come back tomorrow because we got more work to do.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, and amorous.